Warcraft, the Tree of Eternity. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 551, Dwarf King Gargant. The stasis trap was the last resort for the orcs to limit Gargantuan, but after Gargantuan activated the avatar state, the stasis trap had no effect at all. Now Gargantuan was truly unstoppable. In the avatar state, Gargantuan's changes were not only the great expansion of his body and the improvement of his attributes. Some benefits brought by the increase in body size also appeared in the subsequent battles. Before using the avatar, the range of Gargantuan's Thunderstrike was a circle with a radius of about 30 meters. However, as his height, which was originally much shorter than that of an ordinary archer, suddenly grew to the same level as a mountain giant, the range of the Thunderstrike was greatly increased. Unknowingly crossing the area full of stasis trap, Gargantuan swung his warhammer, which had grown as big as himself, and smashed it on the ground. The movement was not just a few small cracks on the ground and a small tremor. As the warhammer, which was bigger than 10 orc warriors stacked together, hit the ground, huge cracks appeared in the 300-meter area around Garganth. Moreover, under Garganth's super enhanced Thunderstrike, the entire battlefield began to shake, and the soldiers on both sides even thought that an earthquake had occurred. Looking around Garganth, the orc soldiers who had previously covered the road orcs' escape had disappeared. This was not to say that they were extremely fast and escaped before Garganth's Thunderstrike came. Rather, these orcs suffered this super enhanced Thunderstrike and either fell into the huge cracks on the ground or were beaten into pulp by the shockwave and could not be seen in their original form. The damage caused by Garganth's Thunderstrike was a world of difference from the previous ones. Originally, the orcs arranged a large number of orc warriors behind the static trap, wanting to play a trick on Garganth and see if they could beat Garganth to death with the static trap. But who would have thought that Gargantuan, who had activated the state of the god of heaven, was really like a god, completely ignoring the static traps that the orcs had high hopes for, and rushed directly to the orcs in the rear. The dense formation of the orcs made Gargantuan's super enhanced version of Thunderstrike release and show the ultimate power of this skill. Yufei used the convenience of the god's perspective to count that the damage caused by Thunderstrike this time was 100 times that of each previous one. In other words, Gargantuan's first attack, after activating the state of the god of heaven, brought tens of thousands of casualties to the orcs. No, not casualties, but the kind of death that was so thorough that even the corpses could not be pieced together. Although it was because the orcs gathered together and prepared to use the static traps to beat Gargantuan. So Gargantuan's Thunderstrike caused terrible casualties in the dense formation. But even with such an excuse, the death of tens of thousands of the same kind still caused the morale of the remaining orcs to plummet. This kind of self-inflicted large-scale losses is actually more depressing than the losses in the frontal battle. In contrast to the orcs' sudden low morale, the hill dwarves seemed to have taken stimulants after Gargant used the god of destiny. Suddenly, their strength increased a bit, and they fought more bravely. Something is wrong? Yufei was puzzled. He saw clearly that the stimulant state of the hill dwarves appeared before Gargant had killed tens of thousands of orcs with one blow. Could it be that the god of destiny state has any special meaning for the hill dwarves? Gargant was still in the battle, and Yufei was embarrassed to disturb him, so he had to bury his doubts in his heart and continue to observe the progress of the battle. The situation on the field now is that after Gargant had transformed and struck a shocking blow, the orc soldiers became listless, as if they had taken laxatives, while the dwarves were full of spring, as if they had taken aphrodisiacs. Ahem, they are vigorous and powerful. As one side gained strength, while the other lost, the dwarf warriors, who were originally at a disadvantage in the battle with the orcs, actually began to suppress the orcs. Now, the orcs were at a disadvantage in close combat, where they had an advantage, and they quickly began to disintegrate under the long-term long-range support of the Night Elves. Gargantuan was not satisfied after destroying tens of thousands of orcs with one blow, and began to walk around the orc camp with his long and thick legs. Gargantuan, who was in the form of a god descending to earth with a height of more than 20 meters, could easily crush several orc warriors to death with just his feet. The damage he could cause with his giant hammer was unimaginable. Under the heroic fighting of the suddenly brave dwarf warriors, the continuous long-range attacks of the Night Elf troops, and the nuclear-like deterrence of Gargantuan, the orcs lost their desire to fight, and soon formed a great rout. Seeing that Gargantuan, who had already established the victory, led his people to pursue the orcs, and gradually took back the dwarf hills originally occupied by the orcs, Yufei was very satisfied in his heart. In fact, with regard to the hundreds of thousands of orcs in the dwarf hills, the Night Elves could easily support and easily eliminate these orcs after they eliminated and expelled the orcs in the northern icefield. However, Yufei wanted to see what level Gargantuan, who had transformed into a hero, could show in the battle, so he did not send reinforcement to the dwarf hills, but only let Avril lead the Night Elves who originally supported the hill dwarfs to cooperate with Gargantuan in the battle. In fact, Yufei also knew that, although the hill dwarves had surrendered to the Night Elves wholeheartedly, no race would like other races, even their own suzerain troops, to settle in large numbers on their own territory. After all, the hill dwarves were not a race produced by Yufei like the Night Elves, nor were they a native elf race that believed in Yufei. Under certain conditions, Yufei still had to consider the self-esteem of the hill dwarves. However, Gargantuan obviously did not disappoint Yufei. He, who had transformed into the King of the Hills, led this battle and personally created the victory of the battle. In this way, Gargant, who was originally a member of the Hill Dwarf Elders Council, will have a higher reputation among the Hill Dwarfs, and will have the greatest say, right? Yufei thought so in his heart. Gargant was the first Hill Dwarf to come into contact with the Night Elves. Not only was he rescued by the Night Elves, but Illidan also killed those sets to avenge his destruction of the tribe. If the hill dwarves were to choose a dwarf who was most loyal to Yufei and the Night Elves, then Gargant would be it. Therefore, after Yufei discovered that Gargant could be transformed into the hero Hill King, he did not hesitate at all, and immediately asked Gargant to rush to his original body and transform into a hero through the Elder Altar. This is to enhance Gargant's status in the hill dwarves, so that he can better control the hill dwarves for himself. Now that this battle is over, I guess the hill dwarves will all regard Gargant as their idol, right? Yufei was right. Gargantuan had indeed become the idol of all the dwarves of the hill dwarf tribe, and more than that. During the battle, Yufei discovered that the hill dwarf warriors looked at Gargantuan in a state of deity with a strange look in their eyes, and he had doubts in his heart. After the battle, this question was finally answered. When Gargantuan led a large number of dwarf warriors to completely recapture the dwarf hills, all the hill dwarves prostrated themselves around Gargantuan, who had already returned to his ordinary dwarf form. Yufei, who had been paying attention to the situation in the dwarf hills, was stunned, but Gargantuan looked calm, and as it should be. What's going on? Yufei, who couldn't hold back his curiosity, saw that the war was completely over, so he started to ask Gargantuan directly. Now Gargantuan looked arrogant in front of the dwarves, but when Yufei's voice came into his mind, his face was only respectful, although he didn't know whether Yufei could see his respect. Gargantuan quickly gave an answer to Yufei's question. It turns out that the reason why the hill dwarfs are called the hill dwarfs is because according to legend, this branch of the dwarves has the bloodline of the hill giants of ancient times. This is not just an illusory rumor. Thousands of years ago, when the dwarves were still united, almost every dwarf king was a hill dwarf. This is because only the strongest among the hill dwarves can transform into a hill giant and possess extremely powerful power. In other words, the hill dwarves do have the bloodline of the hill giants in their bodies, and the hill dwarves who can transform into hill giants are naturally the dwarf kings. Thousands of years ago, only records have been left. No dwarf knows how powerful the dwarf king who can transform into a hill giant is, but this does not hinder the hill dwarves yearning. In the battle just now, Gargantuan used the god of heaven to transform into a giant, and was immediately recognized by the hill dwarves as the legendary hill giant transformation. It is for this reason that the dwarf warriors were as vigorous as if they had taken aphrodisiacs. So that's how it is. Yufei suddenly realized. No wonder Gargant was so excited after he successfully transformed into a hero. I thought he was overjoyed because of his increased strength. It turned out to be because of this reason. Gargant must have thought that he had activated his bloodline. But it's okay this way. After all, Gargant is different from the frost trolls and snow fur monsters. He is a native resident of Eslays. The less secrets of the Night Elves, the better. Gargant was believed by the Hill Dwarfs to have awakened the bloodline of the Dwarf King. Naturally, he was elected as a patriarch of the Hill Dwarves and directly became the king. The Hill Dwarf Elders Council system, which has lasted for thousands of years, has since been changed to a monarchy. The title of Gargant, the King of the Hill, is well deserved. Chapter 552, Frost Wolf Clan. Under the leadership of Gargantuan, the Hill Dwarves have recovered all their lost land, and the Dwarven Hills have returned to the Hill Dwarves. After the reform, Gargantuan became the real Dwarven King, at least the King of the Hill Dwarves. The Night Elf troops led by Avril did not stay for long after the Hill Dwarves completely recovered their lost land and returned to the Whispering Wind Forest. Yufei returned after a long absence, and Avril was busy with the war and had not come to greet him. After expressing his affirmation of Avril's fighting, Yufei was not prepared to let the Night Elves idle. Since the Orcs dared to invade the territory of the Night Elves, how could he let the Orcs have an easy time? Besides, Yufei's goal is to unify Esraz. The Orcs will naturally be a part of the unification. But look at what the Orcs have done now. Not only have they invaded the territories of the Night Elves and the vassal races of the Night Elves, but they have also marched into the human world in a big way. These damn Orcs, don't they know that the human world is my cup of tea? Yufei was actually very annoyed about the Orcs attacking the human world. Now that the Orcs who invaded his territory have been driven away and killed, it's time to settle the score. Yufei said so in his heart. However, the rise of the Orcs was sudden, and even Yufei, who had the heart to unify Eslays before, had not learned about the specific situation of the Orcs. Before, Yufei's main target of attack was the human world. Therefore, even if he wanted to retaliate against the Orcs' ignorant behavior now, he didn't know where to start. So what he has to do now is to find out what the Orcs are like now. As for the candidate to find out the situation of the Orcs, Yufei originally planned to let Illidan go. When Illidan was in the demon world, he went undercover in the Lava Kingdom, and was extremely successful. After all, it was a strange thing to be the supreme ruler of that force undercover. But Yufei thought about it again. Illidan's success as an undercover agent was because he could completely transform into the appearance of a fire demon. Even the mythical powerhouse of the Fire Demon Emperor could hardly tell the difference. With such convenience, Illidan achieved such an unimaginable achievement. And Illidan could transform into the appearance of a demon because of his demon domain. The demon domain is not the orc domain, so it naturally does not have the ability to make Illidan look like an orc. In this case, it would be inappropriate to let Illidan go to the Orcs to inquire about the situation. Finally, after thinking about it, Yufei finally found a class of good candidates. One is the bear warrior who had just transformed into a hero. The other is a snow bear monster. The snow bear monster is similar to the bear man and the Orcs. Even if there are some differences, the difference is not very big. Letting the bear warrior and even the snow bear monster tribe go to the Orcs to inquire about the situation is a very good choice. After making the decision, Yufei immediately gave the order to the bear warrior. The bear warrior who had just transformed into a hero was also very loyal to Yufei. This loyalty is even deeper than that of the Hill Dwarves. How should I put it? The loyalty of the Warcraft Advent monsters that Yufei subdued to the Night Elves is similar to the loyalty of the monsters transformed by spells in the game, and they have completely become their own units. Therefore, the bear warrior chose to execute Yufei's order without any hesitation. According to Yufei's instructions, the bear warrior, who became the patriarch of the snow bear monster tribe, after being transformed into a hero, led the snow bear monster tribe, and quietly left the northern icefield and headed towards the territory of the western orcs. Yufei chose the snow bear monster to perform this task, which was actually a helpless move. Among his subordinates, only the snow bear monster tribe was more like orcs, and could get along well with the orcs. It was just that in the previous battle in the northern icefield, some of the snow bear monsters also participated in the battle. Although the battlefield was cleaned up at that time, who knows if some green-skinned orcs would escape back. If the identity of the snow bear monster tribe was recognized at that time, it would be a bit difficult to deal with. Considering this, Yufei quickly gave the bear warrior a new order. After he led the snow bear monster tribe into the territory of the orcs, he asked the snow bear monster tribe to hide, and the bear warrior alone went deep into the orcs to find out the news. After transforming into a hero, the bear warrior's appearance was different from that of ordinary snow bear monsters, so he was not easily recognized. Moreover, the bear warrior, who had a level 6 hero level, had legendary strength. With super strength and ultimate skills, the angry bear warrior could even tear an epic strongman alive, and even if he was discovered to be a spy, he would not worry about not being able to escape. In this way, the bear warrior led the snow bear monster tribe into the territory of the orcs, and Yufei had been paying attention to the bear warrior from a god's perspective. At the same time, he also asked the Night Elves to prepare for war. After finding out the situation, they marched into the orcs to avenge the previous invasion. Yufei was not a very generous person. He would not be polite if the orcs bullied him. In Yufei's observation, the bear warrior's execution of the task was still in line with the orders he issued. After leading his people into the territory of the orcs, the bear warrior went all the way to the northwest and finally settled the snowfield bear monster tribe in a frost canyon. Then, he walked alone to the south, ready to find the orc tribe. Yufei thought that the orcs attacked the northern ice field only because there were no mountains blocking it, and it was relatively easy to reach the human world. In fact, it was impossible for many orcs to live in the cold north, because their living supplies were too scarce. Except for those orcs with thicker fur who could endure the cold in the north, most of the orc tribe should be in the south. According to Yufei's speculation, the bear warrior was also prepared for a long journey of several days. But unexpectedly, just when the bear warrior settled the snowfield bear monster tribe and headed south for half a day, he actually discovered an orc tribe. It was gradually getting dark at this time, and the grey net was pulled open, covering the sky. Fortunately, this is still in the north, and the ice and snow on the ground are piled up all year round, and the reflected light is enough for the bear warrior to see the tribe not far away. The tribe that appeared in front of the bear warrior didn't look small, but the camp was similar to some small towns of humans. If it wasn't already night when he arrived here, the bear warrior would have been discovered by the patrol of the tribe if he had walked here during the day. But, I don't know what kind of orcs this orc tribe is. With doubts, the bear warrior walked directly to the gate of the tribe's camp. Although it might be dangerous to just walk over, since he encountered an orc tribe so soon, if he stopped, because of the possible danger, he would not be able to find out the news when he met more tribes later. The orcs of the tribe not far away were obviously very alert, and the bear warrior was discovered when he was still a kilometer away from the tribe's camp. Yufei also exclaimed, "If you can find a single person a kilometer away, then if it is a large army approaching, it may be discovered from a long distance." This tribe living in the northern part of the orc territory is not simple. When the warning sound was heard from afar, the bear warrior stopped to show that he was not an enemy. Then, he followed the prepared words and said that he was just an orc traveler from the north and wanted to stay for one night. After discovering the tribe here, the bear warrior didn't have to wait for long. Several figures quickly ran out of the tribe and rushed to where the bear warrior was. When these figures were still hundreds of meters away from the bear warrior had already seen the true faces of these figures with the light reflected by the ice and snow. These figures were riding a giant wolf with snow-white fur, and they also had a wolf-shaped head. It seemed that this tribe was a werewolf tribe. But why did it feel a little wrong? Yufei, who was paying attention to the bear warrior, felt a little weird in his heart, but he couldn't find the source of the feeling for a while. When several werewolves riding white wolves came not far in front of the bear warrior, Yufei finally found out what was wrong. The Night Elves had fought with the orcs before. According to Yufei's observation, now the orcs, whether they were originally tigers, bears, or pigs, have all turned green. Yufei guessed that this might correspond to the green-skinned appearance of the orc infantry in Warcraft. But now the werewolves that the bear warriors encountered all had white fur, and no green could be seen. What does this mean? Yufei's thoughts turned rapidly, but he could not analyze the hidden truth because of insufficient information. Yufei breathed a sigh of relief. He sent the bear warriors to the territory of the orcs. Wasn't it just to find out the situation? What is the hidden truth in this? What is the current situation of the orcs, and why those orcs turned green? There will always be answers. After seeing the appearance of the bear warriors, the werewolves were obviously relieved for some reason. Then, a leading werewolf asked, "Bearman, you come to my Frostwolf clan to stay? Is it true?" It turns out that the name of this werewolf tribe is the Frostwolf clan. Wait. Frostwolf clan? Exclamation mark. Euphony was shocked. Isn't the Frostwolf clan a clan of the Orcs in the background story of Warcraft? The Orcs prophet Thrall is from the Frostwolf clan. It should be a coincidence, right? Euphony was a little surprised and doubtful, but this did not prevent the bear warrior from reacting. Yes, I came from the north and wanted to find a place for my tribe to live in the south, so I came here. If it is convenient, please let me rest in your tribe for a night. If not, it's okay. I've gotten used to staying in the wild these days. Ahaha, the third update is here. In fact, Han Chen himself didn't expect that he could actually finish writing 9,000 words today. He was so stuck yesterday, but today he wrote very smoothly. By the way, please recommend and subscribe. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 553, Tricks and Entry. In Euphony's opinion, wolves are suspicious by nature, and so should werewolves. Although the explanation given by the bear warrior seemed reasonable, it could not withstand scrutiny, and was difficult to distinguish between true and false. Those werewolves would not easily believe the bear warrior's words and let him enter the camp of the Frostwolf clan. But what surprised him was that, after listening to the bear warrior's explanation, the werewolves carefully observed the bear warrior, and agreed to the bear warrior's request to stay overnight. The situation went so smoothly that the bear warrior couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and did not make any moves that would make the werewolf suspicious. He just followed the wolf riders and walked towards the camp of the Frostwolf clan. These werewolves actually believed the bear warrior so easily? This is unscientific. Besides, if the Frostwolf clan settled here, they should not be unaware of whether there was a bear tribe in the north. The bear warrior's statement was just a try. Why didn't these werewolves show any doubt? Euphony was puzzled, but he couldn't let the bear warrior ask directly. Fortunately, when the bear warrior followed a few werewolves on the way back to the Frostwolf clan camp, the werewolves took the initiative to talk to the bear warrior. "Bearman, what's your name?" The leading werewolf turned his head and looked at the bear warrior, asking. "Gru." The bear warrior was frugal with words and answered the werewolf directly. The current situation is very strange. According to Euphony's guidance, he is adhering to the concept of saying less and making fewer mistakes, and not saying anything is not bad. The werewolf didn't care much about the bear warrior's somewhat vigilant attitude, but continued to talk to the bear warrior. "Brother Gru, has your tribe lived in this area for a long time?" The bear warrior was a little speechless. Why did this werewolf call him brother like this? Is my charm so great? But at the same time, his vigilance was greatly improved. Is he trying to find out my true strength? Fortunately, the bear warrior had already prepared a statement about the Snowfield bear monster tribe, and immediately answered the werewolf's question, which he thought was a test of him, without hesitation. "If we are talking about the north, our tribe has indeed lived here for a long time. But if we migrated to this area, we have only recently arrived. In this icy and snowy north, a few days' journey is not actually very far, but it can be called nearby." "Oh, so that's the case. Our Frostwolf clan also moved here recently, but we migrated from the south." The werewolf did not seem to doubt the bear warrior's words at all, but revealed such an important news. It was not until then that Euphony realized that there was really no conspiracy waiting for the bear warrior. It is also true that the orc's brains are not like humans, with so many twists and turns. Even if it is a werewolf, if he suspects that the bear warrior is an enemy, he will not do any tricks to lure the enemy into a trap. If it is said that the Frostwolf clan has only recently moved to this ice field from the south, everything can be explained. Because they have only moved here recently, the Frost Wolf clan does not know whether there are other orc tribes around, so they will easily believe the words of the bear warrior. Then, if the newly moved orc tribe has not yet established a firm foothold, they must want to build a good relationship with the local tribe first, so they will show such an attitude towards the bear warrior. Maybe after the bear warrior enters the camp of the Frost Wolf clan, he will be received by the werewolf chief and have friendly consultations. But this is still a little unreasonable. As far as Yufei knows, the orcs are more scattered than humans. Although they are not divided into countries like humans, they are still the Orc Empire in name. But in fact, the different orc races and even the different tribes of the same race cannot be called united. In Yufei's opinion, if the Frost Wolf clan knew that there was an orc tribe nearby, they would never make a peaceful decision easily. The orcs are somewhat similar to demons. They all decide things with their fists, even more than demons who occasionally play some conspiracies. Why are these werewolves so friendly to the bear warriors? They actually started talking heatedly after Yufei figured out all these things in a flash and told the bear warrior to relax and talk to the werewolf. The bear warrior no longer saved words and started to talk along with the werewolf. My werewolf brother, our tribe migrated to the south because it was getting colder and colder in the north, so we had to go south. If your Frost Wolf clan originally lived in the south, how could you think of settling in the north? Having made up his mind to ask questions, the bear warrior also took the opportunity to call him brother. However, in his heart, he was very disdainful of the werewolf. A werewolf with the strength of only silver and gold dared to call him brother. If he hadn't concealed his strength, I'm afraid this guy would be paralyzed by fear. It was also Yufei's request that the bear warrior conceal his strength for the time being. The strength he showed now was only about gold. After all, a traveler with mediocre strength is not as vigilant as a strong person or a weak person who obviously has no strength to travel far. For some reason, when the bear warrior asked such a question, the wolf man who seemed to have completely trusted the bear warrior suddenly showed a trace of doubt in his eyes. The bear warrior's heart skipped a beat. Did he make a mistake somewhere? The wolf man answered the bear warrior's question with a little doubt. Brother Gru, don't you know the current situation of my orcs? The bear warrior was uneasy, but fortunately Yufei was behind him, teaching him to follow the wolf man's words, to make up for the mistakes that appeared before for some reason. Sorry, brother wolf man, I don't know what you are talking about. Our bear tribe has lived in the far north for some reasons hundreds of years ago, and the news is very closed. Did something big happen to the orcs? I really don't know. The bear warrior's face showed a trace of embarrassment and some unbearable past memories, as if the snowfield bear monster tribe really lived in seclusion in the north hundreds of years ago, as he said. The feeling of looking back at the past with great sorrow was about to burst out, and several werewolves quickly made up their minds of the so-called some reasons such as the tribe being excluded and persecuted. Looking at the acting skills of the bear warrior, Yufei had to praise him in his heart. He looks rough now, but I didn't expect him to be a natural actor. Yes, after all, he is a hero, and it is natural that he has high wisdom. The werewolf's suspicions disappeared under the excellent performance of the bear warrior. The bear people are famous for their honesty among the orcs. These werewolves would never have thought that the bear warrior who looks like a bear man is actually not a bear man among the orcs, but a hero who can be called cunning and treacherous, and Yufei is behind him to help him lie. The leading werewolf opened his mouth and was about to explain to the bear warrior the big thing that happened to the orcs, but during the conversation, they had already crossed the short distance of less than a kilometer and came to the gate of the Frost Wolf clan camp, so they could only stop talking. The bear warrior and Yufei shouted in their hearts at the same time that it was a pity. Although we should be able to find out the current situation of the so-called orcs in the Frost Wolf clan later, the longer we delay, the greater the possibility of changes. While the werewolves were negotiating with the werewolves guarding the gate, the bear warrior carefully observed the camp of the Frost Wolf clan. Seeing that the wooden piles that formed the outer wall of the camp were obviously new wood stumps, the bear warrior believed that the Frost Wolf clan had indeed moved here recently. After the werewolves and the werewolves guarding the gate said a few words, the werewolves guarding the gate looked at the bear warrior carefully and then let them in. Their eyes made the bear warrior a little strange. After the werewolves who went out to pick him up also looked at him like this, it seemed that they no longer suspected that he was an enemy. But now there was no time to think about it. After the werewolves led the bear warrior into the camp, they asked the bear warrior to follow them and walked all the way to the depths of the Frostwolf clan camp. After entering the gate, the werewolf stopped talking to the bear warrior. Thanks to book friend Weihe for the reward of 100 Nyangbi points. Chapter 554 Chief Thrall. Are you going to take me to see the chief of the Frostwolf clan? The bear warrior made a guess in his heart when he found himself going deeper and deeper under the guidance of the werewolves. His guess was correct. Not long after walking, the werewolves were led by the bear warrior to the door of a big tent in the center of the Frostwolf clan camp. After reporting, the leading werewolf led the bear warrior into the big tent, while the other werewolves stayed outside. Entering the big tent, the situation that appeared in front of the bear warrior was not like the 2 rows of swordsmen showing off their power. There was only one werewolf in the big tent, and he looked quite old. The werewolf's eyes revealed a gleam of wisdom, and it even made people wonder whether he was a werewolf or a human in wolf skin. The werewolf on the main seat of the big tent waved his hand, and the werewolf who led the bear warrior in went out. In the big tent, there were only the werewolf who might be the chief of the Frostwolf clan and the bear warrior. The bear warrior became very alert at this moment. He didn't think that the chief of the Frostwolf clan had discovered something wrong with him, but he realized that the werewolf in the big tent was very powerful and could even bring him danger. The werewolf, who was not young, showed a kind smile and began to talk to the bear warrior. Bear warrior from the north, welcome to the Frostwolf clan. I'm the chief of the Frostwolf clan, and my current name is Thrall. Thrall? The bear warrior didn't react, but Yufei was really shocked. If the name of this werewolf tribe was just the Frostwolf clan, then there was a great possibility that it was a coincidence, but the chief of this Frostwolf clan was actually named Thrall. The name of the tribe is the Frostwolf clan, and the chief Thrall is clearly the configuration of the Frostwolf clan in Warcraft. Yufei's mind was full of thoughts, and then a question popped up. If this Frostwolf clan is really the Frostwolf clan in Warcraft that traveled to Esraz, then shouldn't the residents of the tribe look like the native werewolves of Esraz? At least, the orc prophet Thrall in Warcraft is not a werewolf. At most, he just rides a wolf and can summon ghost wolves. No, it's all messed up. Yufei felt confused. Forget it. Let's see if the bear warrior can solve all the questions in this Frostwolf clan. At least for now, the identity of the bear warrior has not aroused any doubt. Chief Thrall, I'm Gru from the Northern Snowfield Bear Tribe. It's an honor to meet the chief. In front of Chief Thrall, whose eyes flashed with wisdom and could make him feel the breath of danger, the bear warrior spoke very cautiously. This caution was interpreted by Thrall as nervousness. His expression became more kind, wanting to make the bear warrior relax a little. Gru, don't be nervous. We, the Frostwolf clan, have no ill will towards you and your tribe. You took the initiative to ask for the night, didn't you? The reason I invited you to my tent is just to learn about the situation in the north. I'm sure Broly has told you that our Frostwolf clan has only recently migrated here. The bear warrior was still cautious, but he was very interested in Thrall's words, so he just continued. Unfortunately, I may disappoint you, Chief Thrall. If you want to ask about the situation in the northernmost area near the far North Sea, then I can easily tell you. But if it's nearby, our tribe has just migrated from further north, and we really don't know the surrounding situation. After a pause, the bear warrior continued. In fact, I'm afraid I don't know the surrounding area as well as you, the chief. At least I don't know that there are large forests around that can make so many stakes. The bear warrior was referring to the camp wall of the Frostwolf clan. The bear warrior's statement was obviously a bit beyond Chief Thrall's expectations, but he didn't just let the bear warrior go, but continued the conversation. So that's the case. It's a pity. But our Frostwolf clan and your Snowfield Bear tribe have just migrated here recently. Although we are in the south and the north, it's fate. This is clearly a way to build friendship. The bear warrior was silent. He hadn't figured out the situation between the Frostwolf clan and the Orcs yet, so he couldn't make any decisions easily. Chief Thrall didn't care either. He took the initiative to talk to the bear warrior without any airs of a chief. This made Yufei a little surprised. The bear warrior was now just a gold level bear man. As a chief of a tribe, this thrall could be so courteous and humble, which really had some of the style of the prophet thrall in Warcraft. In the subsequent conversation, the bear warrior also told Chief Thrall what he had just said to the leader of the werewolves named Broly, saying that his mission was to go to the south and find out the situation in the south, to consider more for his tribe. After listening to the bear warrior's words, Chief Thrall pondered for a while and actually began to advise the bear warrior. Gru, your tribe is located in the far north, and is isolated from the news. It is understandable that you don't know the current situation of the orcs, but in my opinion, migrating to the south is not a wise choice. The reason why our Frostwolf clan came to the north is to seek refuge. Seek refuge? Yufei's heart suddenly became interested. The bear warrior also knew that there must be something wrong. The current situation of the orcs might be learned from Chief Thrall, so he immediately began to ask questions. Respected Chief Thrall, Broly just told me that something happened to the orcs. But what happened? In my opinion, the Frostwolf clan is a very powerful tribe. Why would they need to seek refuge? Chief Thrall looked at the bear warrior deeply and did not immediately answer the bear warrior's question, but asked another question in return. Gru, is it true that your Snowfield bear tribe has not changed in the past 2 years? Crisis. Big crisis. The bear warrior and Yufei both had warning signs in their hearts. If Thrall's question was not answered well, the bear warrior might have to beat the Frostwolf clan. Yes, if the bear warrior and the Snowfield bear tribe he mentioned are really orcs, there will probably be some changes. Chief Thrall has unknowingly defeated the bear warrior. Various ideas circled in his mind, and Yufei immediately began to command the bear warrior to respond. In his opinion, his guess should be 80% correct. The bear warrior once again showed his acting skills like an actor, with a look of confusion and excitement on his face, and hesitantly answered Chief Thrall's question. This, Chief Thrall, if you really want to say it, our Snowfield bear tribe has really had some strange situations in the past 2 years. For some reason, all the bears in the tribe have gained some strange abilities, which greatly increased our strength. As he said, the bear warrior touched his head, as if he was embarrassed. It was because of this strange situation that our chief decided to move from the far North Sea to the south. Before leaving, he didn't let me tell others about this. Chief Thrall laughed. Gru, you don't need to hide your identity from me. Exposed. These 3 words popped up in the minds of the bear warrior and Yufei. The bear warrior was even ready to activate the 2 skills of super strength and anger, and made preparations to kill the Frostwolf clan. But Thrall's next words made him relax again. It turned out to be a misunderstanding. Should I call you Gru? Or should I call you Chief Gru? Thrall looked at the bear warrior with a smile and said so. Seeing the genuine surprise on the bear warrior's face, Thrall was a little proud. I don't think that a legendary strongman would be just a pioneer in the bear tribe. It turned out that Thrall saw the strength of the bear warrior, and the so-called hidden identity refers to the chief. Scared me, Yufei complained in his heart. The bear warrior also quietly relaxed, and responded to Chief Thrall with an embarrassed look on his face. Chief Thrall has a good eye. Gru admires you. It seems that I can't hide it any longer, so I can only admit it. Yes, I'm the chief of the Snow Plains bear tribe. In fact, I discovered your Frostwolf clan in the south, and came here to investigate the situation in person. Chapter 555 A long talk. When the bear warrior truly acknowledged his identity as a leader of the tribe, although Chief Thrall had already been confident, he was still a little surprised, and his attitude changed. After all, this is the leader of a tribe. Even if it is a small orc tribe, generally speaking, there is no way to let the chief of the tribe be a pathfinder. But from another perspective, the chief of the tribe is willing to rely on his own tyrannical strength to investigate the situation instead of sending weaker tribesmen who may be in danger as pathfinders, which is also worthy of respect. Chief Thrall did not know that the bear warrior was lying to him. In fact, it was not a lie. After becoming a hero, the bear warrior did become the chief of the Snowfield bear monster tribe. As a tribal chief, Thrall naturally had to treat the bear warrior with an equal attitude. If other orc tribes found that the chief of a neighboring tribe came to their tribe alone, they would most likely kill or put this bold and reckless chief under house arrest. But the Frostwolf clan was not an ambitious tribe, and the current situation of the orcs was not suitable for such things, so Chief Thrall had no intention of neglecting or even imprisoning the bear warrior. It was not until this time that Chief Thrall stepped down from the main seat of the tent and personally pulled out a huge chair for the bear warrior, who had been standing and talking to him, and asked the bear warrior to sit on it. The bear warrior was not hypocritical. Since Thrall had already determined that he was the chief of the bear tribe, he was happy to see it happen, and sat directly on the chair that actually fit his bear figure. Chief Thrall, please forgive me for the previous deception. There are too many strange things happening in the tribe, and we have just moved here from further north, so we are a little sensitive to the appearance of your Frostwolf clan. Chief Thrall seemed very generous at this time, although the bear warrior had deceived him before. Chief Gru, this name shouldn't be fake, right? If I were you, I would naturally investigate the new forces that appeared near my tribe. I just didn't expect Chief Gru to come here in person. I'm really honored. Can you please stop playing take eye? What I want to know is what the situation of the orcs is now. Bear Warrior and Euphony were both secretly criticizing Chief Thrall. Is it useful to say these nonsense? With this idea in mind, Bear Warrior directly confronted Chief Thrall instead of continuing to be polite. Chief Thrall, you are too polite. Our tribes are destined to migrate here at almost the same time. We must interact more in the future. However, Chief Thrall, please explain what happened to my orcs now. Our Snowfield Bear tribe has been in the north for a long time, and we are really too isolated from the news. Chief Thrall was stunned, but then he laughed heartily and responded to Bear Warrior. Chief Gru is really a quick-witted person, so I won't beat around the bush. After saying this, Chief Thrall stopped talking for a while and pondered, as if he was organizing his words. The Bear Warrior was not in a hurry for this moment, staring at Thrall to see what he would say. After a long time, Chief Thrall seemed to have sorted out his thoughts and spoke slowly. Chief Gru, you said before that many tribesmen in your Snow Plain Bear tribe have gained strange powers and their strength has greatly increased. In fact, this is not the case with your tribe. The entire Orc tribe has gradually experienced this situation that is collectively called God's gift since 2 years ago. God's gift? The Bear Warrior asked. Chief Thrall nodded. Yes, it is God's gift. These mysterious powers are like gifts from heaven and have nothing to do with us, neither fighting spirit nor magic. The Bear Warrior was not surprised to hear the concept of fighting spirit and magic from the orcs. Almost all the races in Eslays practice fighting spirit or magic. As for the orcs, there has never been a term like shaman or wizard since ancient times. Even for Warcraft and even dragons, they can only be said to be strong in addition to magic, but they have not escaped the system of fighting spirit magic. At this point, Chief Thrall waved his hand, and 2 purple-black giant wolves suddenly appeared in the tent. Upon closer inspection, these 2 purple-black giant wolves seemed rather illusory, and should be spirits. This is the mysterious power I have obtained. I call these 2 giant wolves that completely appeared from the void ghost wolves. Chief Thrall is showing the so-called special power of God. Such a summoning is indeed not something that can be done by fighting spirit or magic. The Bear Warrior was very calm when he saw this scene. He himself is a hero with 4 special abilities, and the heroes transformed before and after him each have special abilities. Summoning ghost wolves is not a powerful ability. However, Euphony is not as calm as the Bear Warrior. Damn, Frostwolf clan, Thrall. Summoning ghost wolves, are you going to confirm to me again and again that this is indeed the Orc tribe and Warcraft? Shaking his head in his heart, Euphony completely denied this guess. Although from these 3 points of view, the Frostwolf clan here, Chief Thrall here, does have a close relationship with the Frostwolf clan and the Prophet Thrall in Warcraft, this is not the Frostwolf clan in Warcraft traveling through time. Because Euphony knows that, if it is really the wise and capable Prophet Thrall, the Frostwolf clan led by him will never be forced out of the heartland of the Orcs, and forced to come to this cold north from the south. Besides, the Frostwolf clan in Warcraft is just called Frostwolf, not a werewolf tribe. If this werewolf tribe is really the Frostwolf clan in Warcraft, then where is the Kodo? Where is the headhunter? Forget it, I can't find the answer by thinking about it here, so let's see what Chief Thrall says. Euphony has a hunch that he may vaguely know some truths. The bear warrior seemed very calm in the face of the sudden appearance of the ghost wolf, which made Chief Thrall a little surprised and confirmed that the tribe behind the bear warrior should have really obtained some special power. The ghost wolf disappeared in just 2 seconds, but the bear warrior could feel that it was not Chief Thrall who dismissed them, but the 2 ghost wolves were invisible. The 2 ghost wolves alone obviously could not hurt the bear warrior, so he did not care, but continued to listen to Chief Thrall attentively. It stands to reason that it is a good thing to suddenly have some mysterious power and increase one's own strength. Not to mention, this situation is common among my orcs, not just individual cases of a few orcs. In other words, after this change, the overall strength of my orcs has changed dramatically. After a pause, Chief Thrall looked at the bear warrior deeply. Chief Gru may not know yet, those new orcs have already fought to the heart of the human world. The origin of the bear warrior's fabrication before was a tribe that moved to the north hundreds of years ago, so it is impossible that he did not even know about the dispute between the orcs and the human race. Therefore, he immediately showed his acting skills again, with a look of disbelief and shock on his face. What? Our orcs actually broke into the human world? The bear warrior did not fail to notice the new orcs mentioned by Chief Thrall, but he knew that Chief Thrall would naturally explain it to him. So he was just surprised that the orcs pushed the human race in the opposite direction. Chief Thrall had a complicated expression and shook his head. It's not our orcs, but the new orcs. The expression on Chief Thrall's face could not be told whether it was resentment or disgust. Anyway, when he mentioned the new orcs, he did not look like a fellow tribe. The bear warrior did not play dumb this time, because he knew that this might be the key to the current situation of the orcs. New orcs. When did our orcs say this? If it's new orcs, are there old orcs? Or old orcs? The bear warrior was full of curiosity. Chief Thrall broke away from that strange emotion and smiled bitterly. No, there is no such thing as old orcs or old orcs. However, the counterpart of new orcs is ancient orcs. After saying this, Chief Thrall stared at the bear warrior with sharp eyes. Chief Gru, we are all ancient orcs. Chapter 556 New Ancient Orcs. New Orcs. Ancient Orcs. The bear warrior was a little confused. Even Euphony was puzzled. Orcs are orcs. When did they become divided into ancient orcs and new orcs? Euphony has read a lot of Slaze's books, and there is no such saying about the orcs. But among the elves, the ancient elves are different from the current elves. For example, the Night Elves have always been regarded as the remnants of the ancient elves by the creatures of Slaze. Speaking of which, the bear warrior was called an ancient orc by Chief Thrall. Well, this may be the reason why the Frostwolf clan easily accepted the bear warrior. According to Chief Thrall, the new orcs and the ancient orcs should be opposing existences. If they are both ancient orcs, they should have some incense and affection. Without hesitation, after fainting for a moment, the bear warrior began to ask Chief Thrall, Chief Thrall, what are the new orcs and the ancient orcs? What is the difference between the two? Has our orc empire been divided? Previously, when the bear warrior and Chief Thrall talked, they both referred to the orc tribe, not the orc empire. Because although the orc tribe is a unified empire in name, in reality, each tribe is independent. Regarding the term new orcs and ancient orcs, the first thing that the bear warrior thought of was whether this nominal unity no longer exists. Chief Thrall's eyes dimmed, and he continued to shake his head. Orc empire? There is no orc empire anymore. There are only 2 terms for the orc tribe now, the new orcs and the ancient orcs. Each orc tribe will be divided into one of these 2 categories. As for what the new orcs and the ancient orcs are, wait for me to tell you slowly. The bear warrior made a gesture of listening attentively, and he knew that the next thing might be a long speech. Chief Thrall did not disappoint the bear warrior's expectations, and just told him all the information that the bear warrior came to the orc territory to find out. It turned out that orcs had acquired some special abilities 2 years ago, and the awakening wave of abilities called God's Gift was not stopped until a year and a half ago. Almost every orc had acquired some abilities to a greater or lesser extent. Of course, there were only a few like Chief Thrall who had special abilities like summoning ghost wolves. Most orcs only had their bodies greatly strengthened, and their strength greatly increased. But even so, the orcs were ecstatic. Soon, the orcs decided to attack the human world, to avenge the historical feud between the two tribes. However, just when everyone was happily working together to prepare for this, something unexpected happened. Some orcs, or most of them, gave up the fighting spirit or magic they practiced, because of the powerful god's gift. Because they felt that these local powers seemed to hinder the use of God's gift. After giving up the practice of fighting spirit or magic, the appearance of these orcs changed. The most obvious and most common thing was that those orcs whose bodies were greatly strengthened turned into greenskin after giving up the practice of fighting spirit and magic. At first, this change in skin color caused some panic, and many orcs were not prepared to do it again. However, those orcs who became green-skinned found that when they completely gave up the practice of native power and became green-skinned orcs, their power was even stronger than before. In other words, the power given by God seemed to be incompatible with the original power of the orcs themselves. After giving up the fighting spirit and magic, the power given by God became purer, which could make the orcs' strength increase again. Now the orcs were excited. Most of the orcs chose to give up the practice of fighting spirit and magic. Because the orcs were not very talented in fighting spirit and magic, they relied more on their strong bodies. It was precisely because of this that they could not defeat humans in the past. Doing so naturally had side effects, but the orcs whose bodies were greatly strengthened all turned green. And other orcs who gained some special abilities, for some reason, seemed to have become a different person, and their temperaments changed drastically. This change made some orcs alert. Although S-Laser did not have the proverb that there is no free lunch in the world, there are still similar proverbs. Is the power of God really given by God? Because God saw the orcs were living a miserable life. Combined with the changes that occurred in the orcs who gave up their original power, some sober orcs denied this statement. In particular, a few orcs found that their friends did not even recognize themselves after making the choice to rely entirely on the power of God. Even though S-Lays is not a fairy world and there is no such thing as possession, this situation also made those sober orcs realize that something was wrong. Therefore, they refused to give up their original power and did not make the same choice as those green-skinned orcs. Of course, the power of God is just like its name, as if it was given by God and could not be abandoned and could only continue to remain in their bodies. This small number of orcs were considered by those orcs who completely relied on the power of God to be conservative and gave them the title of ancient orcs, with a little irony. At the same time, they also labeled themselves as new orcs. Among the current orcs, more than 80% are new orcs, and the number of ancient orcs is less than 20%. The pursuit of stronger power is the nature of orcs and even all living things. Even some of the sober orcs eventually made the choice to become new orcs. The Frostwolf clan is a typical ancient orc tribe that is so-called conservative and is rejected by the new orcs. As for how to distinguish whether an orc is a new orc or an ancient orc, the method is very simple. You just need to carefully observe the appearance of the orc. Most of the new orcs are green-skinned, and even a few who are not green-skinned have some strange characteristics. Before, the bear warrior shouted outside the Frostwolf clan to stay overnight. The few wolf cavalrymen who greeted him took a close look at the bear warrior and confirmed that he was not a new orc before taking him into the camp. Because the ancient orcs are now excluded by the new orcs, they have become more united. After listening to Chief Thrall's words, not only the bear warrior, but also Eupheli was stunned. So this is what the orcs are like. It really split, but the strength of the two parts of the split is a bit different. 8 point something to 1 point something. Fortunately, according to Chief Thrall, although the ancient orcs were excluded by the new orcs and even hostile to some extreme new orcs, they would not go to war directly. After all, whether it is the new orcs or the ancient orcs, they are all orcs. The orcs who are now attacking the human world and those who attacked the dwarf hills and the northern icefield before are the so-called new orcs among the current orcs, and have nothing to do with the ancient orcs like the Frostwolf clan. This is so complicated. Eupheli sighed, but he thought a lot in his mind. When Yufei heard the god-given power mentioned by Chief Thrall, combined with the healing guards in the previous war in the Dwarf Hills, the green skin of the new orcs, and the ghost wolf summoned by Chief Thrall, he was sure that this god-given power was the various abilities of the orc units in Warcraft. And the so-called heaven in that god-given power is probably the mastermind who sent himself to the world of Esraz. It should be this heaven that gave the various abilities of the orc units in Warcraft to the native orcs of Esraz. But why did heaven do this? Yufei suddenly shuddered. He had some guesses that he never felt so close to the truth. In this alien world, if the demon world is included, Yufei's own Night Elves, Naga, Undead and the current Orcs have already appeared in the Warcraft races. But the 4 races that have appeared have different ways of ruling or controlling. For example, Yufei himself is a completely self-contained tribe and has the highest control over the Night Elves. Tangyojia is 10% inferior, just the queen of the Naga tribe, respected and surrendered by all Naga units. Zhao Kang's way of controlling the undead is through the so-called undead system, and the actual control is very weak. As for the orcs, they have become orcs that do not appear in Warcraft at all, but have combined with the local orcs. How do you look at it? It feels like an experiment. Chapter 557 The Secret. Yufei's heart was cold. He had spent several years in this alien world, but he would never forget the strangeness of his time travel. When reading novels, he would think that time travel was natural. How could the novel unfold if the protagonist did not travel through time? But when this kind of thing really happened to him, he naturally would not think it was natural. Perhaps he had persecution delusion. Yufei always regarded the voice that caused him to travel through time as the mastermind. But all along, he could not figure out why the mastermind, the sky, would let him travel through time. Now it seems that he feels that he is close to the truth. The different ways of existence or control methods adopted by the 4 races that have appeared do reveal some experimental properties. Yufei couldn't help but think of the mice in the laboratory. Experiments with mice often use several mice at the same time, put them in different environments to observe the changes and draw conclusions. Now, Yufei feels like a mouse. No, it's not like this. It can't be like this. Yufei's eyes suddenly became firm. At least, the power he now controls is real. Perhaps at the beginning, when his human soul and the tree body had not yet completely merged, there was a powerful person who could separate the two. But when he digested the heart of eternity and became the tree of eternity, no one could separate his soul and body. In fact, at this point, Yufei could even abandon his original name. Because at this time he had truly become an eternal tree, the father god of the Night Elves. It was just the memory from the earth that made him unconsciously think that he was a human being and would think about returning to the earth. No matter why the so-called heaven threw him into this alien world, as long as he had enough power to control his own destiny, that was enough. Yufei suddenly had a feeling like Lucian when he was watching the tide on the Kyantang River. I knew I was me in an instant. After thinking it through a little and sorting out his thoughts, Yufei calmed down and continued to pay attention to the situation of the bear warrior. Faced with the news revealed by Chief Thrall, the bear warrior acted stunned. But this time, it was not his acting skills, but he was really shocked. So, the orcs have become like this? Exclamation mark. No wonder the orcs trapped in the west of the Warcraft mountains have the courage and strength to attack the human world, and no wonder the orcs who invaded the Dwarf Hills and the northern icefields have turned into greenskins. There are so many hidden secrets in this. Of course, the bear warriors don't know as much as Yufei, and they don't think too far. After listening to Chief Thrall's story, his first reaction was that this mission was so easy to complete. He was smart enough to naturally hear the subtext of Chief Thrall's words when talking about the difference between the new and ancient orcs. Chief Thrall expressed his disgust for the new orcs without hesitation, thinking that the new orcs were the part that betrayed the real orcs. Perhaps because he regarded the bear warriors as ancient orcs, Chief Thrall did not hesitate to show his closeness in his words and deeds. This is also as it should be. After all, the number of ancient orcs in the orcs now only accounts for more than 10%. If they don't unite, they will be squeezed out by the new orcs and die. Facing Chief Thrall's solicitation, it can't be said to be solicitation. The bear warrior's current identity is the same as Thrall's chief. It can only be said that Chief Thrall has expressed the intention of forming an alliance, or just non-aggression. If it is non-aggression, the bear warrior can naturally agree to it. The order that Ufeli gave him at the beginning was to place the Snowfield Bear monster tribe in the Orc territory and find an opportunity to inquire about the news. It would be best if there is no conflict with the Orc tribe. But the bear warrior feels that the alliance is not something he can decide. The differences between the new and ancient Orcs seem to be huge. Otherwise the Frostwolf clan would not be forced to move to the bitter cold north. If you form an alliance with the Frostwolf clan, it means that you will completely belong to the ancient Orc camp. Although the new and ancient Orcs have no intention of fighting now, it is possible that there will be changes in a while. If you choose to join the ancient Orc camp, you will have a war with the new Orcs. In this way, don't think about getting away easily. The Snowfield Bear monster tribe will become a cloud or a gust of wind in the ever-changing situation of the Orcs. Just when the bear warrior was hesitating, Ufeli sent another message to ask him to agree. Ufeli and the bear warrior naturally considered things from different angles. The snow bear monsters were just a small force under Ufeli. In fact, the overall strength of the hill dwarves was stronger than that of the snow bear monsters. The number of dwarves was much greater than that of the snow bear monsters. If the Night Elves wanted to start a war, the snow bear monsters would be in a position where they could do nothing, and only the hero, the bear warrior, could be of great use. In this case, if the snow bear monsters were sent to the Orcs to stir up the situation, there might be unexpected gains, just like when Illidan was an undercover agent and ended up being the ruler of the undercover force. With Ufeli's signal, the bear warrior no longer hesitated. After considering his words, he responded to Chief Thrall's long speech. So such a big thing has happened to my Orcs. Those new Orcs are too obsessed with the so-called God-given power and have even forgotten their roots. Greenskin, such a change may make most of the races in Slays laugh at it. It's really not right. The bear warrior sighed deeply, as if he was despising the new Orcs. When Chief Thrall heard the bear warrior's argument, although he seemed relatively calm on the surface, he couldn't hide the approval in his eyes. Chief Growl really said it very well. Although God-given power is great, we are Orcs after all, not something else. If you want to show your respect for heaven, you can just make some changes in form. How can you change your skin color and temperament? After a pause, Chief Thrall added, just like us ancient Orcs, although we will not lose ourselves in God-given power, we also show respect to heaven. Our clan's original name is not Frostwolf, and my original name is not Thrall. When I obtained God-given power, I got these two titles, so I changed my name to show my gratitude for God's gift. So that's it. Ufeli suddenly realized. No wonder the Frostwolf clan appeared so strangely. This Chief Thrall did not have the demeanor of the Prophet Thrall in the background story of Warcraft. It turned out that he was not completely traveling through time. Regarding the situation of Chief Thrall and the Frostwolf clan, Ufeli understood that the Prophet Thrall and the Frostwolf clan in Warcraft failed to travel through time, and only some remaining wisdom and information were attained, and the consciousness of the local Orcs was still dominant. Now everything is clear. What about the new Orcs? Except for the low-level Orc infantry, because their soul is not strong, the local Orcs have only changed their skin color to green and their strength has increased greatly. The rest of the higher-level soldiers and even heroes are probably successful in traveling through time. Even if they are not successful, they are completely integrated with the local Orcs. In this case, the change in the temperament of some Orcs mentioned by Chief Thrall can be understood. I just don't know whether those Orcs who may have successfully traveled through time have retained the memory of the Warcraft world, or are they just like the elite soldiers and heroes of the Night Elves, who just have different wisdom and corresponding power. Ufeli guessed that the latter is more likely. They are all time travelers. Among the heroes and high-level soldiers of his own Night Elves, Tangyirjia's Naga tribe, and Zhao Kang's Undead tribe, none of them have memories of the world of Warcraft, and the Orcs should be no exception. While Ufeli was thinking about this, the bear warrior no longer hesitated, and made his intention clear. Chief Thrall, as both ancient Orcs and true Orcs who are willing to uphold the traditions of our Orcs, I hereby request an alliance with the Frostwolf clan on behalf of the Snowfield Bear tribe. to fight against the new orcs. What do you think? The bear warrior's eyes were bright, waiting for Chief Thrall's answer. Thanks to book friend Dana for the precious monthly ticket. Thanks to book friend 909,040,591 for the reward of 100 Nyangbi points. PS. Haha, Hongchen himself feels that the dialogues in this chapter are totally inconsistent with the style of the other world, but rather have an oriental style equals. There is nothing I can do. I've been reading The Blue Emperor by the leader recently, and I was influenced by it. RRRR. Chapter 558, Planning the Human World. The idea of forming an alliance was first revealed by Chief Thrall. When the bear warrior directly proposed it, Chief Thrall was of course very happy and agreed immediately. Since the bear warrior had already roughly understood the current situation of the orcs, he would naturally not continue to rush south into the area controlled by the new orcs. After making an agreement with Chief Thrall, the bear warrior returned to the valley where he settled the snow bear monsters. According to Yuffie, the snow bear monsters will probably take root in the northern land belonging to the orcs for a long time in the future. The agreement between the bear warrior and Chief Thrall was nothing more than the ancient orcs uniting together to fight against the oppression of the new orcs. Now the new and ancient orcs have not completely torn their faces apart, and it is not yet to the point of war. From another perspective, if it really comes to the point of fighting, then the ancient orcs will probably be defeated. Those new orcs who have integrated the orc units and even the heroic consciousness and abilities in Warcraft, I don't know what they are thinking. Although they exclude the ancient orcs, they don't mean to kill them all. In this way, the ancient orcs will have a chance to catch their breath and even find a chance to regain the orcs' orthodox name. The impression of the orcs in the human world now is that they are bloodthirsty and barbaric, and the most important thing is that they are green-skinned. How can this not make the ancient orcs feel heartbroken? Bloodthirsty and barbaric are secondary. If the ancient orcs are not forced into a corner, they will not hesitate to go to the human world to show their stronger power. It's just that this green-skinned person feels a little humiliated. Originally, Yuffie sent the bear warriors to go deep into the orcs to find out the situation, hoping to avenge the previous invasion after understanding the current situation of the orcs. But judging from the current situation, the situation in the orcs is a bit complicated, and Yuffie is not ready to get involved for the time being. The new and ancient orcs have not torn their faces yet, but in Yuffie's opinion, it is a matter of time, and it is very likely that the weaker ancient orcs will provoke it. The bear warriors and the snowfield bear monsters were inserted into the ancient orcs camp by Yuffie, and they will be useful at that time. The land west of the Warcraft mountains, where the orcs live, is barren and desert-filled, and even magic crystal mines are rare. Yuffie really can't think of any great benefits from directly attacking the orcs' territory. Experience and other things are another matter. On the contrary, after knowing that the orcs who are wreaking havoc in the human world are all new orcs, Yuffie is quite interested in this aspect. Chief Thrall must be the product of the failed soul transmigration of the orc prophet Thrall in Warcraft. So among those orcs who have so-called temperament changes and rely entirely on the power of God, will there be any orc heroes who have successfully soul transmigrated? Gromhellscream, Ken Bloodhoof, these are all famous heroes. I wonder if I will see them in this time of Esraz. Yuffie suddenly had a ridiculous idea in his mind. In the background story of Warcraft, Gromhellscream killed the demigod Cenarius. If this guy really succeeded in soul transmigrating, wouldn't the jungle guardian we just summoned be in danger? Shaking his head, Yuffie threw away this fleeting idea. Cenarius is now one of the 4 main heroes of the Night Elves. Even if there are 10 GROM*HELLSCREAMS, they can't kill him. Since he is not going to make a fuss in the original territory of the orcs, Yuffie's eyes naturally turn to the human world again. There is no way. The terrain of Esraz is peculiar, and a Warcraft mountain range is planned in the east and west. No matter the west, you can only look at the west. There is a dragon island known as the Dragon Continent overseas, but Yuffie doesn't care much about it now. Yuffie, who is not going to be idle, still puts the focus on the human world, which is naturally reasonable. The current situation in the human world can be said to be the same as the previous undead disaster. The difference is that during the undead disaster, smoke was everywhere, while the invasion of the orcs at least had a general direction. However, the human countries have just recovered a little after the undead disaster, and such a slight difference is hard to bring any advantages. The orcs are much stronger than the scourge. Didn't you see that even the Cannon Empire lost 1/3 of its territory? Speaking of which, Yufei was a little surprised. The Cannon Empire could actually be considered a neighbor of the Dark Knight Empire. The orcs conquered the territory in the west of the Cannon Empire, but they didn't attack the Dark Knight Empire from here. Instead, they went deep into the hinterland of the human world to attack other human countries. It was really strange that they chose to go far away instead of near. It's a pity that, although you orcs didn't provoke me in the south, you offended the Night Elves in the north. The human world is now in chaos. I guess you new orcs wouldn't care about the addition of a Night Elf to fish in troubled waters, right? Yufei smiled secretly. In the previous scourge, the Night Elves made a lot of money by taking advantage of the disaster in the human world and occupied a lot of territory. Now that the human world has suffered the orc disaster again, it is another opportunity for the Night Elves. Yufei thought about it almost in an instant. The human countries are cicadas, and the new orcs are mantises, so he will be the Oriole. In the name of expelling the orcs, the lands that have actually been occupied by the orcs will become the territory of the Dark Knight Empire after a change of hands. The so-called new orcs will only be a knife in the hands of the Night Elves. As for where to start, it is necessary to consider it carefully. Yufei thought carefully. First of all, it is not possible to go south directly to take the territory occupied by the new orcs in the Cannon Empire. Although this can cut off the road for the new orcs to attack from the west of the Warcraft mountains to the east, it will completely have the effect of expelling and resisting the orcs, but it is not the result that Yufei wants. Not to mention that, if this is done, the pressure of the new orcs will need to be borne by the Dark Knight Empire alone. The fact that the Dark Knight Empire will no longer have the name of enclosing land in the human world makes Yufei deny this direction. But if we don't do this, the kingdoms east of the Dark Knight Empire have not been invaded by the orcs yet, and the so-called expulsion of the orcs will not be established if we want to occupy this land. Yufei made a decision with a fixed gaze. The Night Elves now don't need to worry about the opinions of human countries. To put it bluntly, even if the human world is now in its heyday, the Night Elves can defeat it. What's more, there are now Blood Elves joining, and so many new heroes appearing. The Dark Knight Empire can just enter the Eastern Kingdoms in the name of joint defense. In the previous Undead disaster, 2 of these kingdoms allocated part of their territory to the Dark Knight Empire. They have seen the power of the Dark Knight Empire, and I think they dare not say anything about it. If they really dare to disobey, just push them over. A mere kingdom is no longer in Yufei's eyes. When these kingdoms east of the Dark Knight Empire are actually controlled, they can participate in the chaos in the center of the human world. Yufei, who was already 10,000 meters tall, opened his eyes and looked towards the east. In the buffer zone set by the 3 major human empires, there were originally some duchies and kingdoms. But now, it has become the territory of the new orcs. Those new orcs have the courage to fight 3 at a time. How can my Night Elves, who have been reborn and become extremely powerful, be afraid? Even if humans and orcs unite, I'm not afraid at all. Yufei's heart is full of lofty sentiments. At this time, the Dark Knight Empire is no longer the era when Yufei has to do everything himself. Yufei has been in the demon world for 2 years. Heroes such as Tyrant and Avril and even officials of the local elves have long been familiar with how to manage this huge empire. Yufei's plan for the human world is just to set a general direction and convey it. The specific dispatch of troops and negotiations are done by heroes and local elf officials. This feeling makes Yufei feel very comfortable. This is the treatment that a traverser should have. But Yufei also decided that before the Chimera had a certain number, they should first occupy the kingdoms east of the Dark Knight Empire in the name of defense. Participating in the core war should wait until the Chimera troops have a certain size. Alas, there is no recommendation next week. Book friends, please give more votes to comfort Hanchan's wounded heart. Chapter 559, to line operation. Speaking of Chimera, when Gargantuan was transformed into the King of the Hill, the first Chimera roost had already been successfully built. Not surprisingly, the first Chimera trained was directly elite level and was added as the leader of the Chimera unit. Unlike other units of the Night Elves, the Chimera unit has many skills that can be upgraded. The only skill it has that can be researched and upgraded in the Chimera Roost is a passive skill called Corrosive Spit. Chimera has two attack modes. One is magic attack, which is mainly used to deal with combat units and has a very powerful splash damage effect. But Chimera's splash will also hurt friendly ground units. Fortunately, the Night Elves often use long-range attacks to attack the enemy, so there is no need to worry too much about being hurt by splash damage. After studying the Corrosive Spit, the damage of Chimera to dead objects such as buildings will be greatly increased, and the range will be longer. The reason why this powerful creature with two heads is different from other Night Elf soldiers and only has one passive skill that can be upgraded is because it is already strong enough and no longer needs other skills to improve its strength. From the perspective of attributes, the attack power of Chimera exceeds every type of soldier in the Night Elf tribe, and its health value is second only to the Mountain Giant. Especially in the Hunter Hall, the wild power that increases the damage of Chimera and the enhanced concealment that increases the armor of Chimera have been studied to a high level, which makes Chimera reach a peak in both offense and defense. The most important thing is that in the game, although Chimera has two heads, it is just a model. In essence, it can only attack one target at the same time. The damage caused by the two heads can only be reflected as a splash effect. In reality, such a limitation will not exist. Chimera has two heads, so it can naturally attack two targets at the same time, and the effect of splash attack still exists. There is another point that Ufei was most dissatisfied with when he was playing the game before. Chimera, as an air unit, can only attack ground units, and has no air combat capability at all, which makes the air force of the Night Elves only have the Horned Eagle Knight. This is really unscientific. In this real world, it is naturally impossible for such a ridiculous situation to occur. I remember that the explanation for Chimera's only attack on ground units was that Chimera's head was too heavy to lift up, so it could only attack ground units downward. Ufei sneered at this statement. Well, even if the head is too heavy to lift up, this should not be a reason for not being able to attack air units, right? If it can only attack downward, wouldn't it be possible to attack air units flying lower than itself by flying higher? And under Ufei's personal verification, the so-called saying that Chimera's head is heavy does not exist at all. The Chimeras that flew out from the Chimera perch held their heads high one by one. They are obviously a powerful air unit. How can they only bully ground enemies? The Chimera as the head of the army is named Giorgino, and it can be transformed into a hero. However, it needs to be upgraded to the elite level first, and then it can be transformed into a hero at the Elder Altar with soul crystals. Now, Giorgino is patrolling in the Warcraft mountains, looking for Warcraft to kill to gain experience in order to upgrade. In fact, the Warcraft mountains, not to mention the southern part, have become the back garden, or training ground of the Night Elves. Almost every newly trained Night Elf unit must first go to the Warcraft mountains to gain some experience and upgrade its level. Ufei is no longer concerned about the Dark Knight Empire's invasion of several kingdoms in the east in the name of defense. In the past, Ufei might have to be more concerned and even commanded personally, but now he only needs to let the Night Elves let go and act immediately. What Ufei is concerned about at this moment is how the Blood Elves who returned to the world of Veslays from the Demon World are doing. In the new hero enthronement, the Blood Elves have 3 more heroes, headed by the Blood Magician. In Ufei's secret concern, the Blood Elves are now in good spirits, and there is no panic after the cross-border migration. Not only were they not panicking, the Blood Elves were even more excited. After all, their ancestors were plundered from the world of Veslays by demons and brought to the demon world, so they naturally yearned for their homeland. Now that they were brought back to the world of Veslays by Ufei, their excitement was beyond words. It was a bit funny to say that the Blood Mountain was preserved and separated from the destroyed demon world and descended into the demon world when it fell into the Warcraft mountains, although it did not cause a momentum like Mars hitting the Earth. Because of the spatial leap, it pressed down several mountains that were originally in the place of landing. Fortunately, the place had already been cleaned up by the Night Elves, and there were no Warcraft beasts within 100 kilometers around. The arrival of the Blood Mountain did not cause any reaction from the local creatures. After nearly 10 days of this arrival, the Blood Elves on the Blood Mountain have adapted to life under the sun. At the beginning, almost every rise and fall of the sun and the shining of the 3 bright moons made them extremely excited, but now it is much better. Since Ufei had assigned tasks to the Night Elves under his command, he would naturally not let the Blood Elves go. Under Ufei's orders, hundreds of thousands of Blood Elves advanced southward along the edge of the Warcraft mountains, heading towards the area of the Cannon Empire that had been occupied by the Orcs. Although Ufei was not prepared to block the Orcs' way to and from the human world in the endless jungle, it was still possible to make some attacks in the area of the Cannon Empire occupied by the Orcs. The Blood Elves had shown strong strength in the demon world, and now that they had come to the world of Slays, they needed to be tested. Fortunately, although the snowfield bear monsters were lurking in the Orcs' territory, they had not yet started the battle. Otherwise, Ufei could be said to be fighting on 3 fronts. The battle with the Orcs in the east had not yet started, but several human countries quickly took control. Although the royal families of those kingdoms were very unhappy about the Dark Knight Empire's garrison in their countries, they had to compromise under the pressure brought by the Orcs and the vague threat of the Dark Knight Empire. On the contrary, the 100,000 Blood Elves sent from the south had already come into contact with Orcs after walking along the edge of the Monster Mountain range for a few days. In the town of Talbot, there was a stiff and serious atmosphere. This small town near the Monster Mountain range was originally an important transit station for adventurers from the Cannon Empire to go to the Monster Mountain range, but now the town seemed very deserted. The roads in the town no longer had the once bustling flow of people and stalls on both sides of the street. Even those hotels and shops with storefronts were closed. Occasionally, 1 or 2 human figures walked on the street, all with their heads down and hurried steps. A small meeting was being held under a wooden house near the town wall of Talbot Town. This meeting held in the basement was obviously a bit shady, and the participants deliberately lowered their voices. In the basement, an old man with grey hair and coarse cloth clothes surrounded by people looked worried. Others were talking in a low voice, but only this old man said nothing, just frowned as if thinking about something. A middle-aged man among the people who were discussing seemed to notice the old man's expression. He was originally talking to a young man next to him, but he nodded at the young man, indicating that he should say something. Looking at the direction of the middle-aged man's gesture, the young man quickly understood and spoke to the old man. "Mr. Mayor, it is not a good idea for us to keep discussing without any purpose. This secret meeting has been held 3 times. What should we do? As the mayor, you should express your views on those Orcs and set a tone for us." The young man's voice was deliberately raised, which sounded very loud in the basement. The others seemed to be startled and looked at the young man. However, after hearing what the young man said, they all cast their eyes on the old man, who was called the mayor. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 560, Reign of Fire in Talbot Town. Seeing that he had become the focus of everyone's attention in the basement, the mayor sighed and spoke. "What should I do? How do I know what to do? You all respect me and call me mayor, but compared to those hateful but powerful Orcs, I'm nothing." Everyone was silent. Yes, the mayor was just an official appointed by the Empire. When the town guards were still there, and Talbot Town was still under the name of the Empire, the mayor was of course the highest status in the town. But now, it doesn't matter whether the mayor is the mayor or not. It's just that everyone needs a backbone, so they invited this old man to participate in the meeting. As early as 2 months ago, Talbot Town had been occupied by Orcs who came out of nowhere. It stands to reason that Talbot Town is one of the main transit points for adventurers from the Cannon Empire to the Warcraft Mountains. Not only is a guard assigned by the Empire strong, but many adventurer teams in the town are also not mediocre. Even if there was a beast disaster outside the Warcraft Mountains, it could be resisted. But who would have thought that those Orcs were more terrifying than the beast disaster? One by one, the Orcs, who looked like the Orcs in the legend, but had green skin, broke through the town of Talbot with an extremely tyrannical attitude and quickly suppressed the human resistance. The people who were holding a meeting in the basement were all the well-known figures in Talbot. They were either the leaders of the adventurer team or the presidents of some chambers of commerce. Of course, there was also the original mayor. Seeing that everyone kept their heads down and kept silent after the mayor's words, the young man who started the conversation couldn't help himself. Mayor, what you said is a bit too pessimistic. After all, you are the mayor appointed by the Empire. The Empire has been founded for hundreds of years and has never surrendered even when facing the other two empires. These barbaric orcs will definitely not be the opponent of the Empire. As he spoke, the young man became excited, and his voice became louder and louder. I believe that the Empire's army will definitely recover the town of Talbot and all the land seized by the orcs. What we need to do is to accumulate strength, set a charter and be ready, and when the Empire's army arrives, we will kill all those barbaric orcs. When the young man said these words, the people in the basement had different expressions. Almost no one responded to the young man's words immediately. In this basement, except for the young man who was speaking, the others were not young and not as naive as him. The mayor was very disdainful of the young man's words, but he still responded on the surface. President Mostyn said it well, the glory of the Empire cannot be blocked by barbaric orcs, and the Empire will eventually win the war. Apart from these two clichés, the mayor did not say a word about the young man's statement of setting a charter to accumulate strength. But even so, some people directly expressed their attitudes. Haha, accumulating strength? The combined strength of the entire Talbot town couldn't hold out for half a day against those orcs. Do you think we, the remnants of a defeated army, can defeat the orcs and recover Talbot town? Although I don't know why the orcs didn't kill us humans to death and just station troops here after occupying the town. If we really want to resist, we can only seek death. I'm sorry, I won't accompany you in your suicidal behavior. A man with a sarcastic face expressed his disdain for the young man's statement without any concealment. His straightforward words made the mayor a little embarrassed. After speaking, without waiting for the young man to fight back in anger, the man opened the secret door in the basement and walked out. Looking at the man's back, the young man whom the mayor called President Mostyn shouted angrily, "Ice rule, you traitor to the Empire. Coward. If you have the guts, don't come back. Never participate in our secret meeting again." As soon as he finished speaking, Mostyn was surprised to find that the secret door that had just been closed was opened again, and Avril came back. "Humph, are you scared? Apologize to me and the mayor for your irresponsible words." Before he finished speaking, Mostyn found that the atmosphere was a little wrong. Looking closely, why did Avril's face look so distorted and fearful? Avril opened his mouth, but no sound came out. But soon, everyone knew why he was so scared. The secret door in the basement was smashed to pieces with a bang. Then the entire ceiling, that is, the floor of the wooden house above, was lifted up. The sunlight outside poured into the big pit that had just been lifted up, shining on everyone's face. Everyone shuddered, feeling as if they were rats in a hole dug up and caught. Looking up, everyone's face turned pale like Avril's. Dozens of ferocious heads were looking down from the pit that had turned into the basement. The pale green skin and protruding long teeth on the mouths all brought deep fear to the people below. Orcs, orcs. A tall figure separated the orc warriors surrounding the pit and looked down at the people in the basement. This figure was different from other orcs, and its skin was not green. From the appearance, it seemed to be a minotaur. However, the well-informed men knew that this minotaur looked different from the minotaur described in the classics. Lord Cain. After all, he was once the mayor of Talbot Town. The old man first focused his mind and humbly saluted the minotaur. The minotaur stared at the mayor, who bowed his head for a long time and sighed. "Why don't you want to obey the rule of the great orcs?" The minotaur seemed to be asking everyone in the basement, or talking to himself. Young Mostyn finally couldn't bear the solemn atmosphere and yelled loudly with his neck stiff. "You barbaric and vulgar orcs. My Cannon Empire has been bowing to other countries for more than 300 years since its founding. It's simply a delusion for foreign races to want to rule humans. Wait, one day the Empire's army will crush you to pieces." Mostyn seemed to have made up his mind to die. After yelling these words, he closed his eyes tightly, waiting for death to come. However, in his heart, he himself didn't quite believe what he said. After 2 months of anxious waiting, he didn't wait for the Empire's army, but waited for the Orcs to post notices on the bulletin board in the center of the town, saying that they had occupied a certain place. Although Mostyn looked passionate, he was actually desperate and had given up. The mayor smiled bitterly, and after calling the Minotaur Lord Cain, he stopped talking. He knew that, if they gathered secretly, they would never be able to get away with it. In this case, there was no need to pretend. The grey-haired mayor opened his mouth, straightened his back, and raised his head, wanting to support Mostyn. However, when he looked up and saw the scene in the sky, his eyes widened quickly, and he forgot what he was going to say. The Minotaur seemed to have noticed something, and also looked up at the sky. At this time, the clouds above the town of Tabut had turned red, and tongues of fire kept spewing out of them, as if there was a fire dragon rolling in it. A fireball flew down from the red cloud, and attacked the town of Tabut. Following this fireball, a large number of identical fireballs fell from the red cloud one after another. Magic. This is advanced magic. The Empire's magician group is here. The old mayor's voice was even louder than that of the young Mostyn at this time, and he could not hide his excitement. The Minotaur on the pit frowned and stomped his right hoof on the ground. Boom. The surrounding land trembled rapidly, and the 4 walls of the basement collapsed immediately. Countless soil and rocks buried the humans with great force. But at the moment of being buried, everyone saw the fire cloud above the town of Talbot. The mayor, Mostyn, and even Israel, who seemed cowardly before, felt peaceful at this moment. Finally, the Empire is finally going to reclaim the land occupied by the Orcs. A war trample solved the problem of everyone in the basement, and the Minotaur straightened his neck and roared loudly, "Prepare for battle." Chapter 561 Depressed Cain. Long after, the survivors of Talbot still remembered the reign of fire that day, which was their lost youth. However, at that time, neither the Orcs nor the humans in the town felt good. Before the Minotaur, who was called Cain by the mayor, roared, most of the Orcs and humans in Talbot had already noticed the changes in the sky. Some uninformed Orc soldiers thought it was a fire cloud at first, but the fireballs that fell later explained the power of magic to them. If this wave of magic was not a large-scale meteor shower instead of a meteorite, then Talbot would probably be razed to the ground soon under such a large-scale magic. Fortunately, what fell from the fire cloud was only a fireball instead of a boulder, and the Orcs and humans hiding in the house did not perish under the attack of the fire rain. In fact, even if the Orcs faced the fireballs directly, most of them were not killed all at once. Many powerful Orcs, such as the Minotaur named Cain, did not suffer any damage under several waves of fireballs. However, Talbot was already a sea of fire at this time. The Tauren holding the huge totem in his hand had a solemn expression. This Tabot town was already the hinterland of the Orc-occupied area, and there were not too many Orc troops stationed there. The reason why it was here was to try to subdue humans in this Tabot town, but it did not expect to be attacked. Cain had only seen such a large-scale magic when he was fighting against the Cannon Empire Mage Corps. He did not expect to see such a spectacular scene. After killing those human mages, Cain listened attentively. This is the sound of horse hooves! Exclamation mark. There are also cavalry coming here? What are the Orcs from other places doing for a living? And they actually let the human troops penetrate here. Because of what those people in the basement said, Cain had some preconceived ideas and thought that the attack on Tabot town was brought by the Cannon Empire troops. Although he was a little confused about why the human troops would cover and attack Tabot town without any scruples and were not afraid of hurting their own people, Cain still organized the Orc soldiers and prepared to fight according to the method used to deal with the human knights. In Cain's experience over the past few months, he has seen many human knights, but whether it is a so-called noble private knights, the regular knights of the Cannon Empire, or even the royal knights that have only appeared a few times, they are actually very weak. Those so-called knights are far inferior to the centaurs. A strong Orc soldier can hold back the charging horse, making those human knights lose the advantage of charging. However, Cain made a mistake. When the Orc soldiers of Talbot town gathered at the town wall under Cain's order, what they saw was a completely different force from the knights they had seen before. The blood-red armor, the sharp spears, and the strange war horses with red horns on their foreheads all made it clear that this knight force was the Blood Knights. The ones attacking Talbot Town were not the Imperial army that the residents of the town and Kane thought, but the Blood Elves who wandered here. The previous wave of fire rain was the result of a dozen elite Blood Elf magicians jointly casting exclusive range magic. At this time, Euphea's eyes were also focused on the town of Talbot. The 100,000 Blood Elves who set out from the Warcraft mountains were divided into smaller teams after arriving in the south, and each entered the Orc-occupied area of the Cannon Empire in a different direction. The Blood Elf troops that were attacking the town of Talbot were the first troops to actually fight the Orcs. The Blood Knights charged very quickly. Although the Orcs were a little confused about the Blood Knights' different appearance from the human knights they had seen before, when the Blood Knights rushed to the front, they all roared with all their might, raised their weapons, and chopped forward fiercely, and opened their arms to hug the horses that were rushing towards them. In the battles they had encountered before, this trick worked every time. Although the impact force formed by the human knight's charge was strong, those weak humans would often subconsciously hold the reins when facing the Orcs' imminent battle axes, which reduced the impact force of the horses. Moreover, many human knights would even be directly split in half by this axe, and they would not have time to launch an attack. As for the impact of the warhorse, it was completely inadequate in front of the Orc soldiers, whose bodies had been greatly strengthened. They could just hug it with a wave of their arms. What surprised the Orc soldiers was that those red or bloody cavalrymen did not slow down at all under the chops of their battle axes, as if they wanted to die together. Many Orc soldiers showed disdain on their faces. They had seen such fearless knights in some human knight groups before, but the Orcs were often able to exchange injuries for lives. Until they were really pierced by the lances of the bloody knights, many Orcs still held a contemptuous attitude towards the bloody knights. The Orc warriors in the front row roared and chopped down their battle axes, but the Orcs who had 100% confidence that they would hit those lances were shocked to find that the lances of the bloody knights suddenly seemed to have the speed of light, and they had already pierced them after their eyes were blurred. The bloody knights who were at the front were all elite lancers. After using the lance assault skill, they thrust their lances at a speed that was not visible to the Orcs. The strong bodies that the Orc warriors were proud of were as easy to pierce as paper under the lances of the lancers. However, although these green-skinned Orc warriors were severely injured, they did not die immediately. Instead, they kept spurting blood from their mouths, but still tried to hold the heads of the bloody knights' horses with hideous faces. The bloody knights did not move at all. The vitality of the demons was much stronger than that of these Orcs, so this struggle was not a big deal. As expected, the dying struggles of the Orc warriors did not work. They opened their arms, but they could not hold the heads of the bloody knights' horses. Before that, they had been completely stabbed to death by the bloody horns on the horses' heads. The Tauren Kane felt something was wrong as soon as the Orc warriors and the Scarlet Knights came into contact, and then the scene of the Scarlet Knights breaking through the Orcs' defense line like a whirlwind made his ominous premonition become a reality. No, this can't go on. Kane was shocked by the sharpness of the Scarlet Knights, but he quickly reacted and began to take measures. Kane raised his neck to the sky in mood, and then he smashed the totem pole in his hand to the ground in front of him. Boom. Starting from the position where Kane's totem pole fell, a deep gully suddenly appeared on the ground, extending all the way to the formation of the Scarlet Knights. This is not a gully in the general sense. The huge gully that extends out is accompanied by powerful energy. Even the Scarlet Knights are thrown to the ground under such a great force. More importantly, the Scarlet Knights who were directly hit by the gully fell into a state of dizziness. If it is a gully in the sense of terrain, then such an obstacle is nothing to the Scarlet Knights. Liu Ben's Delu horse can cross the stream to save the master, and the unicorns under the crotch of the bloody knights are much stronger than Delu. However, there seems to be a mysterious power on the gully, created by the Tauren Kane, and it even involves space. The knights blocked by the gully can only go around from the end, but cannot directly cross it. This is the gully skill of the earth-shaking god Bull. Euphe is very sure. At the same time, he also became interested in the Tauren who created the gully. To be able to have such a heroic skill, the Tauren should not be an unknown person. Kane, who is not an unknown person, is now extremely depressed. He did not expect that the enemy who attacked the town of Talbot was so powerful. When did the army of the Cannon Empire have such strength? If the troops of the Cannon Empire are also powerful, How could we orcs take down 1/3 of the territory so quickly? Until this time, Cain still did not recognize that the bloody knights were not human, wearing bloody armor all over their bodies, and their figures are not much different from those of humans. The identities of the blood elf knights are indeed not easy to identify. Chapter 562 Asking the Minotaur for beef. It was not until half a minute after Cain cast the gully that he vaguely realized that he seemed to have made a mistake in judgment. The attacking enemy did not seem to be human. What made Cain make the correct judgment was the blood elf magician and priest who appeared behind the blood knight. It should be noted here that, because of the habit of wanting to hide some strength, Euphony did not send the blood elf witch, sword dancer, and magic destroyer out. Speaking of which, the magic destroyer seemed to have no effect on the orcs who did not know magic. The blood elf magician and blood elf priest were not wrapped in armor like the blood knight. Cain easily distinguished the difference between blood elves and humans. Finding that things were not what he imagined, Cain could not help but shout at the blood elf troops. Who are you? Why are you attacking the territory of the Orc Empire? Facing the powerful blood elf troops, Cain had to make a low posture first, even though they suffered a great loss on the battlefield. Euphony's mind moved, and the blood elf troops temporarily suspended the attack. None of the 3 heroes of the blood elves were in this army, and finally an elite blood elf magician came out to answer. Orc Empire? This seems to be the territory of the Cannon Empire, right? When did the orcs come to the Warcraft mountains? At Euphony's signal, the blood elf magician pretended to know nothing, of course, in order to get some questions. Cain breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that this powerful and mysterious army is not the army of the Cannon Empire. In this way, there is room for reasoning. I think this should be a misunderstanding. Our Orc Empire will restore the glory of the ancient times, and now this is the territory of the Orc Empire. I wonder what you should call it? The orc soldiers under his command suffered heavy losses, and Cain felt aggrieved, but on the surface he had to pretend to want peace. The blood elf magician lowered his head, as if he was thinking, but in fact he was receiving Euphony's command. We are the blood elves who live in seclusion in the Warcraft mountains. We came to Talbot to get some living supplies. Who are you? The blood elf magician, or Euphony, was full of nonsense trying to distinguish the identity of the Tauren opposite. The blood elf magician did not try to fabricate an unknown race to perfunctory the Tauren opposite, because the blood elves have many similarities with the elves in appearance, and it is obviously not feasible to fabricate lies. Cain answered the blood elf magician's question without hesitation. I'm Cain Bloodhoof, one of the heroes of the Orc Empire. Blood elves from the Warcraft mountains. If you just need living supplies, I think I can provide them to you. Of course, please stop attacking Talbot Town before that, so that you will gain the friendship of the Orc Empire. Cain Bloodhoof! Exclamation mark. Euphony didn't expect that he would meet another famous person so soon. Of course, he also knew that this Cain Bloodhoof could not be the real Tauren chieftain in Warcraft, but could only be a soul descender like Chieftain Thrall. I think the situation of this Cain Bloodhoof is different from that of Chief Thrall. After all, he is mixed with those green-skinned orcs, and should belong to the new orcs. Facing this Tauren chieftain, Euphony suddenly had some desire to tease him. After a moment of silence, the blood elf magician responded to Cain Bloodhoof's words. If you can really provide enough living supplies for our entire blood elf clan, then we can consider not attacking here anymore. Cain Bloodhoof naturally noticed the word entire in the blood elf magician's sentence. It seems that this race called blood elves is going to open its mouth wide, and Cain Bloodhoof is ready to be bitten hard. However, the next words of the blood elf magician made him lose his mind a little. As for the supplies we need, let's have 100 dir of beef first, the blood elf magician said frivolously. Dir is a common unit of measurement in the Slays continent. 1 dir is roughly equivalent to 10 tons on Earth. Of course, it is impossible for the blood elf magician to ask for 1,000 tons of beef from the Tauren. Looking at the airflow from Cain Bloodhoof's nostrils, Euphony chuckled in his heart. But what surprised Euphony was that, although Cain Bloodhoof looked extremely angry, he held back and didn't explode, which made him look at him with a new look. Cain Bloodhoof closed his eyes and agreed to the blood elf magician's request. He was afraid that, if he opened his eyes and saw the blood elf magician in a luxurious robe, he would be unable to help but slap him again. I will meet your request, but it will take some time. I hope you can evacuate here first to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. My god, what a skillful diplomatic rhetoric. Is this still the Tauren who looks honest and stupid? Cain Bloodhoof was actually furious in his heart, but he had to hold back his anger in order to protect his orc soldiers. TSK, he is really able to endure humiliation, worthy of being a hard-working old ox. Oh no, Tauren. It's a pity that we didn't intend to let go of this town from the beginning. You fairly thought irresponsibly. The Blood Elf magician spoke again. Why are you in such a hurry? I haven't finished yet. 100 dir of beef is just the initial demand. We Blood Elves have a population of 100,000. A mere 100 dir of beef is not enough for a few days. In total, let me calculate. We need 10,000 dir of beef. Cain Bloodhoof's face became worse and worse, but the Blood Elf magician continued to add fuel to the fire under Yufen's instructions. Well, you shouldn't have so many cows. In fact, we don't mind the meat of Tauren. Boom. Cain Bloodhoof felt like his brain was about to explode. His eyes suddenly turned red, and the hot air from his 2 huge nostrils was clearly visible. This is too much. Why haven't I heard that the elves actually eat beef, and their appetite is so good? Exclamation mark. Don't think that we are afraid of you, just because there is a blood word. The orcs are not easy to mess with. With a mew full of anger, Cain Bloodhoof finally put aside all his considerations and slapped the Blood Elf magician with a gully, which looked as if those words with hidden sarcasm did not come from his mouth. However, the Blood Elf magician was well prepared, and must have used the chaos spell, Defense, before Cain Bloodhoof slapped the gully. Fortunately, he drew the advanced defense magic this time. A khaki energy shield was firmly buckled on the Blood Elf magician, so that Cain Bloodhoof's gully could not cause him any harm. Cain Bloodhoof, with red eyes, didn't care and grabbed the huge totem pole and rushed towards the Blood Knight who was running again. While he was talking to the Blood Elf magician, the Blood Knights quietly retreated a distance, giving themselves some space to charge. The orcs in Talbot Town have now fully assembled. They were simple-minded and didn't have as many considerations as Cain Bloodhoof. They wanted to fight with bloodthirsty faces from the beginning, but when they saw Cain Bloodhoof, the leader and hero of the orcs, didn't move. They didn't fight back for a while. Now the calm Cain Bloodhoof was completely angry under Yufen's provocation and began to attack the Blood Elves regardless of anything. The orc soldiers naturally followed him excitedly and rushed towards the Bloody Knight. Cain Bloodhoof took the lead and faced the Bloody Knight who was charging again. But when he was still some distance away from the Bloody Knight, he stopped and posed a strange posture of raising his hoof to step down. As Cain Bloodhoof posed this posture, a huge phantom of a minotaur suddenly appeared behind him and made the same posture of raising his hoof and stepping. Damn. Yufen made a prompt decision and directly ordered the Bloody Knight to stop charging. Swish. The Bloody Knights all reined in their horses and quickly turned from extreme movement to extreme stillness. Such an emergency break during a rapid charge could only be done by the Scholar Knight who was able to receive Yufen's command at the same time and had extremely strong execution ability. Chapter 563, Easy Victory. Seeing the Scholar Knights break suddenly, Cain Bloodhoof almost suffocated there. How can you stop? How can you stop? Shouldn't the Knight's charge be unstoppable? Exclamation mark. Cain Bloodhoof was extremely depressed. The shadow of the Minotaur behind him gradually dimmed, as if it would disappear at any time. In desperation, Cain Bloodhoof could only stomp his hooves in the air heavily to the ground. But energy waves appeared out of thin air and emanated from Cain Bloodhoof's body, but unfortunately these energy waves only touched the front row of Scholar Knights and could not move forward. This was not because the Scholar Knight's defense was too strong, but because the range of Cain Bloodhoof's skill was only so large. Yufen secretly rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. When the huge shadow of the Minotaur appeared behind Cain Bloodhoof, Yufen had already judged that he should cast Echo Strike, so he ordered the Scholar Knights to break urgently. Sure enough, this judgment was correct. Echo Shot is the ultimate move of the Earthshaker Dota, a typical ultimate move with a wide range and sufficient damage. Its damage is mainly reflected in the energy waves emitted, which can bounce on multiple enemies to cause multiple damage. This is somewhat similar to Luna's Moonblade bounce, but the units of action are not of the same order of magnitude. However, this extremely damaging echo shot has a fatal flaw. That is, its range of action is fixed. Only within the range, where the energy wave can be dispersed, can the echo shot play its ability to bounce and cause sufficient damage. Because of Euphenia's timely discovery and command, the Blood Knights just stopped on the line of the echo shot energy wave range, resulting in Kane Bloodhoof's echo shot not being able to play the expected effect. In other words, Kane Bloodhoof's ultimate shot was wasted. How do you feel when you miss your ultimate shot when playing Dota or similar competitive games? Kane Bloodhoof feels the same now. What's more terrible is that in the game, missing the ultimate shot at most will lead to the failure of the team battle and the death of the game character. But Kane Bloodhoof's missing the ultimate shot means that the tone of this battle has been set. Originally, Kane Bloodhoof was hoping that the Echo Slam would be able to determine the outcome of the battle, allowing him to win a battle with fewer troops. But now he wisely gave up the idea. The energy wave of the Echo Slam could at most destroy the Scarlet Knights in the front row, which was just a drop in the bucket. Oh no, even the Scarlet Knights in the front row could not be destroyed. Kane Bloodhoof stared at the Scarlet Knights who were still standing tall after being baptized by the energy wave of the Echo Slam with some disbelief. What was that? Kane Bloodhoof found some golden twisted ripples on the Scarlet Knights in the front row. Although he didn't know what this ability was, Kane Bloodhoof keenly felt that it was these golden ripples that allowed the Scarlet Knights in the front row to withstand the energy wave of the Echo Slam. The golden ripples on the Scarlet Knights were the soul fire cast on them by the Blood Elf priest behind them. Soul fire could increase a unit's armor by 50% and its attack by 10%. The extra 50% armor allowed the Scarlet Knights in the front row to resist Kane Bloodhoof's attack. Of course, this was because they were stopped by Euphony and stopped at the line within the range of the echo wave. Otherwise, even with the armor bonus brought by the soul fire, the Scarlet Knights would suffer heavy losses under the multiple ricochets of the energy wave. Seeing that Kane Bloodhoof's echo attack had been cast, Euphony gave an order and the Scarlet Knights continued to charge again. These Kane Bloodhoofs were completely helpless and could only watch the Scarlet Knights rushing like a torrent of blood and flesh rushing into the formation of the Orc warriors. The only thing he could do was to step on a war trample when a small wave of Scarlet Knights rushed in front of him, temporarily stunning this small wave of Scarlet Knights. The rest could not be taken care of. Looking at the Orc warriors who had no resistance under the charge of the Scarlet Knights, Euphony was very satisfied. Although if the Night Elves came to fight these Orcs, they might be able to shoot these Orc warriors into hedgehogs without getting close. But the feeling of sniping from a distance and charging and slashing with a sharp blade is completely different. Kane Bloodhoof infused the totem pole in his hand with mysterious power and then smashed it hard on a Scarlet Knight in front of him. After using this skill called Strengthening Totem, he finally caused losses to the Scarlet Knights. The totem pole that was strengthened was hit head on, even with the bonus of the Fire of the Soul, but still died under this powerful blow. However, these few kills can only be an exception. On the battlefield of Talbot Town, the defeat of the Orcs is already very clear. Even the Orc warriors who are barbaric and bloodthirsty in the eyes of humans, but are indeed extremely brave in battle, have lost their will to fight. Ordinary Orc warriors do not have Kane Bloodhoof's ability. Kane Bloodhoof, who was identified by Euphony as wearing the template of the earth-shaking divine bull, has various powerful skills and high attributes by nature, so he can cause losses to the Scarlet Knights. No matter how brave a warrior is, unless he is like an undead creature with no consciousness at all, he will gradually become discouraged when facing an enemy that cannot cause any harm. In particular, such an enemy can easily kill him. With the bonus of the Fire of the Soul, even if those thick-armed and big-waisted Orc warriors swing their battle axes with all their strength, they can only cause a little damage to the lancers, and can't even leave a trace on the shield cavalry. And these little damages have been recovered by the blood-sucking ability when the Blood Knight attacks the Orcs. The Blood Knights are showing off their power in the front, and the Blood Elf magicians behind are not to be outdone. Led by the Blood Elf magician who asked Kane Bloodhoof for beef and was almost killed by Kane Bloodhoof's gully, dozens of elite Blood Elf magicians cast a spell together again, condensing into a red cloud over the town of Talbot. After just a few seconds, countless fireballs fell from these red clouds as before. However, this time, the fireballs were no longer scattered throughout the town of Talbot, but fell on the Orc warriors. In front of them was the invincible knight dressed in blood, and above their heads was a fire cloud with death symbols, raining down deadly fireballs. The green-skinned orc warriors were almost scared to death, and the idea of retreating also emerged in their hearts. After some hesitation, some orc warriors in the back row retreated to the interior of Talbot Town. Although they knew that doing so might only allow them to live a few more minutes, the desire to survive made them subconsciously take such actions. Such behavior was soon discovered by Cain Bloodhoof. Seeing that the orcs who had always fought bravely had learned to escape, Cain Bloodhoof could not help but feel a trace of sadness in his heart, but he was not angry. Even Cain Bloodhoof himself was terrified by these creatures called Blood Elves in front of him. Although there were only about 2,000 orc warriors in Talbot Town, they were outnumbered by the 10,000 Blood Elves. However, in the previous battles, to invade the Cannon Empire, 2,000 orc warriors broke through the battle situation of tens of thousands of human troops. These creatures are really terrible. When Cain Bloodhoof was overwhelmed by countless magics and several lances pierced his body and he fell down, he had only this thought in his mind. Very easily, this Blood Elf squad solved the orc troops that were only 1/5 of their own. Yufei was very satisfied with the performance of the Blood Elves. Without staying for long, tens of thousands of Blood Elves quickly left Talbot Town. The previous fabricated statement of plundering daily necessities was just an excuse for Yufei to tease Cain Bloodhoof. He had no interest in occupying a small town surrounded by orc territory. Yufei, who just regarded Cain Bloodhoof as a earth-shaking bull and hurriedly drove the Blood Elf squad out of Talbot Town, did not find that where Cain Bloodhoof fell, there was a small cross shining brightly. Chapter 555 is expected to be completed before Chapter 666. Chapter 564 Return to O'Brien territory. After watching the battle in Talbot Town, Yufei roughly observed each Blood Elf squad. The result of the observation naturally made him extremely satisfied. No matter which Blood Elf squad, they could easily destroy orc troops that were less than their own number or even equal to their own number. Even the Blood Elf squad led by the Blood Mage captured a city occupied by orcs in one fell swoop, killing and wounding nearly 20,000 orcs, but their own losses were relatively small. This tough battle further demonstrated that the strength of the Blood Elf troops was far superior to the same number of ordinary orcs. In the battle of these multiple troops, Yufei also found many orc warriors who were not green-skinned. Those orcs who could cast healing guards also showed their true colors under the siege of the Blood Elves. They were fox or cat orcs with some strange shapes. According to Yufei's guess, these orcs should be the fusion of the broken souls of the Troll Witch Doctor and the local orcs, so they can use skills such as healing guard, static trap. The ranged troops of the orcs also appeared in front of Yufei under the attack of multiple Blood Elf troops. Like the Troll Witch Doctor, among the native orcs without the troll race, the ones possessed by the headhunter were lizardmen of similar size. After observing the actions of the 10 Blood Elf troops, Yufei felt a little bored. After issuing an order to let the Blood Elves act freely and strike the areas occupied by the orcs, Yufei gathered his consciousness. After seeing Cain Bloodhoof, a famous hero in history, Yufei couldn't help but have the idea of personally contacting the orcs. Soon, he took action. A day later, in the Dark Knight Imperial capital, the local elf officials found helplessly that the Emperor of the Empire had disappeared again. However, these elf officials have also become accustomed to the random disappearance of Yufei's Elven King clone. Anyway, this irresponsible emperor has hardly managed state affairs. Even if he stays in the palace, he rarely shows up. Let him disappear. As for the emperor's safety, the elf officials were not worried at all. How could the emperor, who was favored by the father god and became the leader of the elves in the new era, be in danger? Yufei, who ran away from the palace, didn't know what the elf officials thought, and he still felt a little guilty. If he knew that the elf officials had regarded him as an unnecessary mascot, he would not have left the palace secretly, but ran out openly. Unlike the previous route, Yufei chose to go by sea this time. After sneaking out of the palace and coming to the wild, Yufei used the return scroll to the port of the far North Sea and soon boarded a ship bound for the Shadow Kingdom. Of course, the low-key Yufei would not reveal his identity. This time he returned to his previous outfit of a black robe covering his whole body and a hood covering his face, so that people could not tell from the outside that he was the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire. It's a pity that the careless Yufei forgot that he was on a ship of the Shadow Kingdom. After he resumed his clothes in the human world, he was soon recognized by the pirates of the Shadow Island organization, who were now the Shadow Kingdom Navy. Vice Captain Gangplank, a man who looked familiar to Yufei, asked with a puzzled tone, but his words contained a sense of affirmation. Damn. Yufei was a little shocked. It's been 2 years, and someone still recognizes me? Looking at the sailor who asked the question, Yufei thought carefully and finally remembered that this guy was one of his men in the Anchor Pirates. When Yufei appeared in the Shadow Island organization as Gangplank, although most of his men were black-robed pirates disguised as Night Elves, there were also human pirates. This guy who looked familiar to him was one of the oldest members of the Anchor Pirates. Judging from his clothes, this pirate who was only a minion has become the captain of this ship. It seems that Yorick still takes good care of his old brother. Since he has been recognized, Yufei does not intend to hide it. Anyway, as long as his identity as the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire is not dug out, there is no need to hide other disguised identities such as the former vice captain of the Anchor Pirates and Earl O'Brien so deeply. After Yufei reluctantly responded to the former captain who recognized him, he immediately received the best treatment. The captain even vacated his captain's room for Yufei to live in. The ships sailing between the Shadow Kingdom and the far north seaport often have spacious cabins for crew members to live in, because the magic crystal magic core occupies a relatively small space. In Yufei's opinion, the captain's room offered by the captain is no less than the so-called VIP cabin on the ship on Earth. The only thing that surprised Yufei was that his identity as Gangplank had disappeared for nearly 2 years, but he still had a very high status in the hearts of the people in the Shadow Kingdom, which was really incredible. In fact, there was nothing surprising about this. The identity of Gangplank that Yufei disguised at the time not only showed extremely strong mental magic ability, but also had a large number of pirates disguised as Night Elves under his command. After the establishment of the Shadow Kingdom, many well-informed pirates knew about some of the relationships between their country and the Dark Knight Empire. The Night Elves who disguised themselves as black-robed pirates also revealed their identities later. In this way, the identity of the so-called deputy leader of the Anchor Pirates, Plank, was about to be revealed. The captain of this ship was responsible for transporting supplies between the Shadow Kingdom and the Night Elf port in the far North Sea, so he naturally understood the twists and turns. Now seeing Yufei boarding the ship from the far North seaport, he naturally identified the identity that everyone guessed, and he couldn't help but be respectful. There was no conversation along the way, and no pirates or sea monsters were seen. The Shadow Kingdom itself is a country composed of pirates. Now it relies on collecting protection fees from coastal countries for a living, so it is naturally impossible to allow pirates to appear on the sea. And every ship of the Shadow Kingdom has a blue crystal embedded on it. This is a strange object that the Shadow Kingdom obtained from the Collaborator Sea Tribe, which can effectively prevent the invasion of large marine creatures. Yufei got off the ship at the harbor of O'Brien. Although the captain wanted to take Yufei to the capital of the Shadow Kingdom built on the original Shadow Island, he was not qualified to interfere with Yufei's decision, and could only leave O'Brien Port with regret. He hadn't appeared for 2 years. I wonder if this O'Brien territory no longer belongs to me. After getting off the ship, Yufei paced in the harbor. He didn't rush to the Lord's mansion, but thought about this question. His footsteps paused slightly, and Yufei heard a small conversation. When will the Lord show up? This is the second time the Empire has issued a conscription order. A slightly shrill voice said so. Another rough voice quickly answered the question. Why do you care so much? It's the Lord's conscription order, and it has nothing to do with us. Besides, the Lord has a deep background. Didn't you see that the Lord didn't show up at all in the first conscription order, but no one came to investigate? Yufei didn't care about the subsequent words. He noticed the keywords in these 2 sentences. Conscription order. What is this? Yufei, who was intrigued, did not delay any longer, and rushed directly to his Lord's mansion. After feeling some mental connections in the Lord's mansion, Yufei felt relieved. The president and steward of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce, who he controlled, were still in the Lord's mansion, which meant that the O'Brien territory was still under his control. Eupheni's previous worry was not that the president of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce and others would betray him, because those people had been slightly controlled by him mentally and completely obeyed him. What he was worried about was that if he, the Lord, did not appear for a long time, would the officials of the Holy Lion Empire deprive him of his territory? Obviously, it now seems that Eupheni's worry is unnecessary, and the O'Brien territory still belongs to him. Earl O'Brien. Chapter 565 The so-called recruitment order. When controlling the senior members of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce, Eupheni simplified the control process as much as possible to prevent himself from becoming confused. But even with the simplified mental control, after 2 years of subtle influence, the members of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce became extremely loyal to Eupheni. Even as soon as Eupheni walked to the door of the Lord's mansion, he was noticed by the senior members of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. They quickly came to the door to greet their lord under the leadership of the old president. Although Eupheni's appearance could not be seen clearly in his black robe and hood, they knew clearly through the vague spiritual connection that this mysterious man was their master, Lord Earl O'Brien, who had disappeared for nearly 2 years. "Welcome, Lord Earl." Eupheni stepped forward, and the members of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce greeted him in unison. Eupheni was unmoved, passed the members of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce who bowed their heads, entered the hall of the Lord's mansion, and sat in the top seat. The members of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce filed in, lined up in several rows, and stood in the hall, each bowing their heads to show respect. After a long while, Eupheni finally spoke. "President Stanley, please explain to me the situation in the territory during this period. In addition, what is a conscription order?" President Stanley, who was worried because of Eupheni's long silence, wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and stepped forward to narrate. As he narrated, Eupheni gradually understood the situation in O'Brien territory in the past 2 years. Although Eupheni, the Lord, had been away, the ability of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce was still very good, and it easily maintained the operation of the territory. For example, the arrival of the tax collectors and inspectors of the empire was all handled by President Stanley. At the beginning, Eupheni smuggled enchanted equipment through O'Brien territory, exchanged for magic crystals and magic cores, and transported them back to the far North Sea. Later, when he supported Yorick to sit on the throne of the Shadow Kingdom, he handed the matter over to the Shadow Kingdom, but the port of O'Brien was still a transit station. Therefore, the economic situation in O'Brien has developed well in the past 2 years. Fortunately, the previous Undead disaster did not affect this place. Instead, the Stanley Chamber of Commerce made a fortune by taking advantage of the enchanted equipment that the Night Elves transported in large quantities at that time. Of course, Eupheni no longer cared much about the income from this small territory. President Stanley always excitedly reported that the Chamber of Commerce's assets had increased tenfold in the past 2 years, but Eupheni remained unmoved. Finally, realizing that his master seemed to be uninterested in this matter, President Stanley finally turned the topic to the conscription order. After he explained, Eupheni understood what this conscription order was. It turned out that this conscription order was still triggered by the Orcs. After the new Orcs conquered the western territory of the Cannon Empire, they turned to the northeast and entered the heart of the human world. At the beginning, the Orcs only bullied those kingdoms, but after conquering 3 kingdoms and finding that other human countries did not react much, they shifted their target to the Empire. In fact, this cannot be blamed on the disunity of the human countries. They have just recovered from the Undead disaster. Apart from the 3 empires, which country has the ability to support other countries? Besides, the Cannon Empire, one of the 3 major empires of mankind, suffered a great loss at the hands of the Orcs, and those kingdoms could do nothing about it. The rampant Orcs chose to go to war with the Holy Lion Empire and the Botswana Empire at the same time. However, to their surprise, they suffered completely different situations from the previous war with the Cannon Empire and these 2 empires. The reason why the new Orcs were able to quickly conquer 1/3 of the territory of the Cannon Empire was that the Cannon Empire did not expect that the Orcs could actually cross the endless jungle and fight to the east of the Warcraft mountains. Secondly, the focus of the Cannon Empire was temporarily placed in the south at that time, wanting to solve the problem of the invasion of the Sea Tribe, so it looked very embarrassed under the offensive of the Orcs. The Holy Lion Empire and the Botswana Empire were different. First of all, they did not have external threats like the Sea Tribe. Secondly, although the offensive of the new Orcs was fast and took 1/3 of the territory of the Cannon Empire at lightning speed, they slowed down when they conquered those human kingdoms later. In this way, the two empires were given time to prepare. At this critical moment, the Holy Lion Empire and the Botswana Empire put aside their past grudges and decided to unite to fight against the invasion of the Orcs. Later, the Cannon Empire also joined in. Although the Orcs did not continue to attack the Cannon Empire, the Cannon Empire could not sit idly by and watch its territory fall. As the first empire to fight against the Orcs, the Cannon Empire had some understanding of the power of the Orcs and shared this understanding with the other two empires at no cost. After borrowing intelligence from the Cannon Empire, the Holy Lion Empire and the Botswana Empire made some targeted arrangements, which seriously frustrated the offensive of the Orcs. This so-called targeted arrangement actually recruited a large number of mages to form a mage group to fight with the army. When fighting against the Orcs, the Cannon Empire found that ordinary human armies were difficult to compete with the Orc warriors, and only the mage group could bring good damage to the Orc warriors. After analysis, the Cannon Empire found that, although the strength of the Orcs had greatly improved compared with the records in the classics, for some reason they no longer knew magic. Since they don't know magic, they naturally don't know how to defend against it, so the ability of magicians can be fully demonstrated. In fact, as a new empire, the number of magicians in the Cannon Empire is not as large as that of the Holy Lion Empire and the Botswana Empire. Therefore, when these two empires gathered a large number of magicians, they really resisted the attack of the Orcs and even managed to keep the enemy out of the country. When the situation was the best, the three human empires even shouted the slogan of repelling the Orcs and chasing them to the west of the Warcraft mountains to completely wipe out the Orcs. Unfortunately, such an advantage did not last long. Soon, with the display of some strange abilities of the Orcs, the armies of the three empires were defeated. The mysterious warrior who could quietly appear in the camp of the rear magician group and then roll up a huge storm, the mysterious wizard who could cast strange spells so that some Orcs would not be harmed at all under any attack, and various other strange things made the Empire army suffer. According to President Stanley's description, Euphony was not surprised to find that the strange abilities of the Orcs were things like healing guards. When the armies of the three empires were beaten back step by step and the Orcs were pressing forward step by step, humans discovered that the Orcs, who were not good at siege in the records, actually showed extremely strong abilities in siege. Some strange machines that looked like catapults, but could burn long-lasting flames and continue to collapse the city walls after throwing boulders. Wolf knights who were only holding scimitars, but could easily chop the city walls into pieces, and minotaurs who could easily knock open the city gates by holding huge totem poles, made the strong city that humans were proud of as fragile as paper in front of the Orcs. The defeat was like a mountain collapsing. The Holy Lion Empire and the Botswana Empire almost fell into the same situation as the Cannon Empire if many families in the country had not risen up to join the war. For example, in the Holy Lion Empire, members of the Saint family went to the battle one after another, and in addition to the private army, they also contributed a large number of mages. In the Botswana Empire, those powerful families also contributed their own strength to resist the Orcs. The conscription order is the product of this situation. The objects of the conscription, in addition to the nobles of all sizes in the empire, are the mages who have not participated in the war before. Coincidentally, Euphony's disguised identity, Earl O'Brien, is not only a nobleman of moderate size, but also a powerful mage. Naturally, the conscription order of the Holy Lion Empire was sent to the O'Brien territory. This kind of wartime order is not comparable to that of tax officials and inspectors, and the Stanley Chamber of Commerce cannot suppress it at all. Fortunately, the Saint Child family came forward to persuade the O'Brien territory to cope with the first conscription order. But just yesterday, the Empire's second round of conscription orders was issued again, and Earl O'Brien's name was on the list. Thanks to the book friend Wendy Hay for the reward of 100 Nyangbi. Chapter 566 New official takes office. So that's how it is. Yufei touched his chin. According to Yufei's personality, he would be too lazy to get involved in such troublesome things, because it would not benefit him. O'Brien County is located on the northeast coast. Even if the Orcs conquer the Holy Lion Empire, this place will definitely be the last place to be attacked. In other words, resisting the Orcs is a relatively distant thing for O'Brien County. However, the Saint Child family is willing to block the conscription order for him once, probably because he saved their master's son, Rothschild. When it comes to the second conscription of Nana, even the Saint Child family has no reason to block it for him again, right? After careful consideration, Yufei finally chose to respond to the conscription order of the Holy Lion Empire. The time when he returned to O'Brien County was too coincidental, which was the manifestation of the so-called conscription order and his fate. Anyway, this time of incognito tour is also to personally see the strength of the Orcs. Isn't it just right to run to the front line, where the human empire and the Orcs are fighting? After thinking it through, Yufei quickly gave orders, asking President Stanley to start the operation and report the news that Count O'Brien responded to the conscription order. However, responding to the conscription is responding to the conscription, but Yufei is not prepared to bring troops to fight for the Holy Lion Empire. There is no standing army in O'Brien. The Stanley Chamber of Commerce controlled by Yufei has always been responsible for maintaining order. If Yufei really wants to bring out the army, he can only let the Night Elves disguise it. However, this is a battle of three human empires united. It is absolutely impossible for the Night Elves to conceal their identities in such a big scene. Yufei simply gave up the idea of bringing his own army. Anyway, the official of the Holy Lion Empire probably values his identity as a legendary wizard more. I guess this should have been revealed by the Saint Child family. As for those last armies, they are actually not taken seriously by the Empire. So, after President Stanley reported the news and brought back a letter of appointment to Yufei, Yufei went to take up his post alone. Oh, it can't be said that it was a person. The sacred giant wolf reappeared and continued to wander in this human world with Yufei. Riding on the back of the sacred giant wolf, the consciousness communication told it the direction to go, and Yufei took out the commission and read it. Earl O'Brien is hereby appointed as the head of the magic division of the 8th Army of the Holy Lion Empire. He will take office within 5 days. This commission is the certificate. Not bad. He was actually given the position of the head of the magic division. However, this 8th army, Yufei saw it as the 8th Root Army, and couldn't help sighing in his heart. I didn't expect that there would be a day when I would be an 8th Root Army. The signature of this commission was not the military department or military minister of the Holy Lion Empire, but the Holy Emperor. What? Yufei was a little surprised. He didn't expect that what he held in his hand was actually an imperial edict. Should he keep it? But then he remembered that this so-called Holy Emperor was the one who was beaten into the palace by the Night Elves and took away the gem on the top of the crown, so he lost interest. However, judging from the fact that the Holy Emperor actually issued a letter of appointment to him personally, the situation in the human empire is indeed not optimistic. Otherwise, there is no need for the Emperor to personally approve his fate. The intention behind this should be to win over the hearts of the people. Yufei forgot that he was an imperial noble and an earl of a high rank. In fact, he was not attached to any great noble, and only the Holy Emperor could appoint him. The so-called imperial military department and military minister, even if their status and rank were higher than his, had no power to order him before he joined the army. The time given in the letter of appointment was relatively loose. In 5 days, at the speed of the Holy Giant Wolf, he could run around the Holy Lion Empire. However, in order to keep a low profile, Yufei still took 3 days to reach the territory of the 8th Army and meet the commander of the 8th Army. Well, this is the head of the 8th Root Army. Looking at the man in front of him with rough skin and strong body, who looked like a platoon soldier rather than a corps commander, Yufei thought absent-mindedly. The corps commander opposite Yufei was a little surprised. It said that a legendary master wizard was sent to lead the wizard group. Was he such a guy who was so young and yet could not hide his youthful aura? However, the commander was quite satisfied that Yufei did not question his image. He was an officer who rose from the front step by step. Those noble officers often looked down on him as a grassroots and often laughed at his image. What the commander did not know was that in Yufei's image, the commander of the 8th Root Army should have looked like this, just like Li Yunlang. After taking the letter of appointment handed over by Yufei and confirming Yufei's identity, the commander reported his name and directed Yufei to the place where the wizard group was stationed. Paramount, this name is not bad. After commenting on the name of the commander of the 8th Root Army, Yufei came to the location of the 8th Root Army Independent Regiment. The wizard group. The environment is not bad. Looking at the wizard group camp, which was separated from the barracks of ordinary soldiers and each tent looked more luxurious, Yufei was a little surprised. In the camp, where the mage core was located, Yufei did not see any tense atmosphere of war. What was going on? Exclamation mark. Looking at a tent not far from the camp gate, a disheveled magician was chasing a beautiful woman with a sweet smile, and Yufei's face darkened. It seems that these magicians need to be disciplined. Standing at the gate of the mage core camp, Yufei's black robe moved without wind, and a powerful mental force instantly covered the entire mage core camp. This mental pressure had no effect on ordinary people, such as the beautiful woman with a sweet smile who seemed to be a prostitute. She did not feel any pressure at all, but was surprised to see the mage who fell to the ground with a snap behind her, thinking that it turned out that noble magicians would also fall. It was not just this magician who fell. Under the sudden strong mental pressure, countless groans appeared in the mage core camp in front of Yufei. There were only 2 places where Yufei felt some slight resistance. There were also 2 guys with good strength. Yufei unexpectedly discovered that there was actually a sky level magician in each of these 2 places. But then, he became tough again. What could a sky level magician do? He had revealed his identity to the Holy Lion Empire as a legendary master magician, and he was also a spiritualist. How could he be stumped by these 2 little legendary magicians? Increasing the pressure, Yufei was satisfied to find that the 2 sky level magicians who could resist a little also fell on the bed with a splitting headache. After feeling that he had taught these magicians enough lessons, Yufei suddenly retracted the spiritual power he had emitted. In his perception, at this moment, every magician in the camp, even those who had fainted, gasped at the same time. This should be enough to show his power, right? Satisfied, Yufei walked into the camp of the mage core. A majestic voice also rang in the ears of every magician in the camp, and those magicians who fainted woke up under this voice. All magicians, gather at the center of the camp immediately. Latecomers will enjoy the same treatment again. After receiving the notice, Yufei quietly stood at the center of the camp of the mage core. It stands to reason that in the army, it is usually the old people who show off their power to the newcomers. Even the new officers have to face some difficulties from their subordinates. As a person who is afraid of trouble, Yufei simply did not give these magicians the opportunity to make things difficult for him, and directly scared them, so that they would obey his command. Soon, some figures came to the center of the camp in a slanting manner. Obviously, the sequely brought to these magicians by Yufei's sufficient mental pressure just now could not be eliminated in a short time. After sensing it, Yufei found that there was really no magician who dared not to gather immediately. It seems that the show of power just now really worked. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 567. The 8th Army sets out. Surprisingly, Yufei did not see any resentment in the eyes of the magicians gathered in front of him. Perhaps this is the privilege brought by strength. It must be that the previous mental pressure has taught these magicians too much. Without much nonsense, Yufei directly used his mental power to control the letter of appointment issued by the Holy Emperor himself, unfolded it and flew it in front of these magicians. With the observation ability of magicians, they can naturally see the content of the letter of appointment clearly in a glance. It turned out to be the new leader. All the magicians suddenly realized Most of the magicians cast their eyes on the two sky level magicians standing in the front, and after seeing that the two of them did not react at all, they all lowered their eyebrows and looked obedient. Well, this is considered acceptance. Yufei did not know what the process of the transfer of military power in the Holy Lion Empire was, so he dismissed the magicians according to his own ideas, leaving the two sky level magicians to inquire about the situation. Scott and Morton were a little uneasy. As the only two sky level magicians in the newly established magician group of the 8th Army of the Holy Lion Empire, the affairs of the magician group were originally managed by the two of them. Although the position of the head of the magician group was undecided, it had been fought over by the two of them. Who would have thought that the Empire would suddenly airdrop the head of the group? It was impossible to say that they were not dissatisfied. The magician group could be allocated a lot of magic resources, and being the head of the group would obviously make the most money. However, these dissatisfactions disappeared as soon as they rose. The extremely powerful mental pressure just now was obviously issued by this mysterious airborne head whose face was unknown. Scott and Morton, who had the strength of the sky level, easily judged that this head must be a legendary or even higher level master. After understanding this, some of the little thoughts in their hearts naturally disappeared. To put it bluntly, there may still be some seniority-based situations in those ordinary armies, but this newly established magician group was originally a group of magicians recruited from all over the empire, and it was natural to follow the principle of strength first. Scott and Morton were able to take charge of the affairs of the Mage Corps and compete for the position of the leader, because they were the strongest among the magicians. Now that there is a stronger one, they will naturally have to stand in the back, and they can still adjust their mentality. Moreover, they also saw in the letter of appointment that the new leader named O'Brien is also a real Imperial Earl. With dual identities, his status is of course higher than theirs. However, obeying Yufei is obeying Yufei, and there is still a competitive attitude between Scott and Morton. When Yufei asked about the current situation of the Mage Corps, both of them rushed to answer. In desperation, Yufei had to point to a magician and let him speak first. Scott, who was pointed at, looked at Morton proudly, and then began to narrate to Yufei with a little respect. As Scott narrated, Yufei gradually understood the overall situation of this Mage Corps. In terms of strength, Yufei had already scanned it when the mental pressure covered the entire camp just now. Now he compared it with what Scott said, and found that his scan was not wrong. There are now a total of 1003 magicians in the 8th Army Mage Corps of the Holy Lion Empire. Among them, there is a legendary master mage, that is, Yufei himself, 2 sky level magicians, who are standing in front of Yufei, 10 cloud level magicians, and the rest are gold level and below, with the majority being bronze and black iron level magicians. Yufei shook his head in his heart. This is what it means to have a mixed bag of good and bad, right? Compared to the hundreds of thousands of blood elf magicians under his command, this Mage Corps is really weak. In terms of organization, the principle of strength first in the magic world is fully reflected. The 10 cloud level mages are the 10 captains of the Mage Corps. Scott and Morton were jointly responsible for this Mage Corps before Yufei arrived. And just as Yufei thought, the independent Mage Corps from the camp is actually independent in nature, but it is nominally under the 8th Army. In terms of status, the commander of the 8th Army is actually unable to effectively command the Mage Corps. Yufei could understand this, as magicians are naturally nobler than ordinary soldiers. This was not Yufei's idea, but an unspoken rule formed in the long history of the Slays continent. It was not wrong to say that Yufei was the head of the 8th Root Army Independent Regiment. In terms of the magic resources allocated, there were some magic crystals and magic materials. Yufei was not very concerned about these, because he did not need the things these local magicians needed. Magic crystals could be converted into energy, but he did not care about that. After getting a general understanding of the situation of the Mage Corps, Yufei appointed Scott and Morton as deputy heads without interest, set some rules, and then went directly into the largest and most luxurious tent in the back part of the camp that had been empty. Scott and Morton looked at each other, then they snorted at the same time, turned their heads away from each other, and returned to their own tents. Of course, the first thing they did after returning was to inform everyone of the rules set by Yufei. The rules set by Yufei were actually very simple, with only 2 items. 1. No irrelevant people were allowed to appear in the camp too. Private fighting was strictly prohibited within the Mage Corps. The first item was naturally in response to the scene that Yufei saw when he first arrived at the Mage Corps camp. How could a dignified Imperial Mage Corps openly summon G? The second item was added by Yufei casually, otherwise the rule would have seemed a bit crude if there was only one item. Well, even so, it was still very crude. This also fully demonstrated that Yufei was not very concerned about this Mage Corps. Yufei thought so. He originally came here to serve only to deal with the so-called conscription order, and his purpose was only to deeply understand the strength of the Holy Lion Empire army and the situation of the Orcs who invaded the heart of the human world. This Mage Corps was just a tool. In fact, he wished that all the magicians in the Mage Corps would die in the war, so that the Night Elves could reduce some resistance and losses when they unified Slays. Yufei did so, and was a hands-off manager, but Scott and Morton did not dare to neglect it. Before, the two of them were competing with each other, and they turned a blind eye to some things in order to win over the magicians under their command. Now that the real boss has appeared and wants to rectify military discipline, the two deputy commanders can only cooperate vigorously. The two rules are not too strict. Even if the two deputy commanders implement them without any discount, the magicians have not complained. Of course, this may also be because they know that complaining will not produce any results. Yufei, who was staying in the tent of the commander of the Mage Corps, was radiating his consciousness to patrol the situation on the Blood Elves. If there was no war in the Holy Lion Empire, the Mage Corps would not need to be dispatched. But soon, the war came. On the third day after Yufei arrived at the Mage Corps camp, which was the last day of his term of office stipulated in the letter of appointment, the commander of the Paramount Corps notified him that the troops would set out. Are they going to have close contact with the Orcs so soon? Yufei felt a little excited. No wonder the letter of appointment stipulated a 5-day arrival time. It turned out that the 8th Army would participate in the war on the front line after these 5 days. Compared to the ordinary soldiers who had to walk and march hard, the treatment of the magicians was much better. Every magician had a carriage for transportation. Of course, this was also because there were not many magicians, otherwise they would have to squeeze in. Yufei was too lazy to ride in a carriage. After being a mount for so long, the Sacred Wolf had also learned how to make the rider feel most comfortable. Sitting on the Sacred Wolf was much more comfortable than a carriage. The 8th Army had a total of 150,000 infantry and 20,000 cavalry. It was quite troublesome to march with so many troops, which made Paramount a little anxious. But all this had nothing to do with Yufei. Sitting on the Sacred Wolf, he comfortably came to the front line with the army 10 days later. Chapter 568, Burning Catapult. At this time, the three human empires have formed a united front. Although the Orcs' offensive was fierce and unexpectedly possessed a strong siege capability, the three empires at least managed to curb their momentum. The place where the 8th Army marched to was actually not the territory of the Holy Lion Empire, but the territory of a kingdom in the original buffer zone between the Holy Lion Empire and the Botswana Empire. The Orcs chose to attack the two empires at the same time, and this buffer zone became a territory jointly fought for by the three parties. Well, it should be said that it was two parties. Although the Holy Lion Empire and the Botswana Empire were still scheming against each other, resisting the Orcs was the top priority of the two countries. The 8th Army was stationed in a relatively large city. This city was the largest city in the kingdom, where the 8th Army was located except for the capital. But at this time, this once prosperous city was only left with a large number of soldiers and no residents. This kingdom is secretly controlled by the Holy Lion Empire. At this critical moment, I naturally have to take care of it. The residents in the city, where the 8th Army is stationed, have all been relocated not long ago. The 8th Army and the 4th Army of the Holy Lion Empire are now stationed together in this city called Zurich. Speaking of it, the 4th Army of the Holy Lion Empire is far higher than the 8th Army in terms of organization, but in fact, the overall strength of the 4th Army is not as good as that of the 8th Army. In addition to the fact that the 8th Army has added a 1,000-man mage regiment, it is more because the original 4th Army has almost been destroyed, and the current 4th Army is newly built. After hearing Paramount's introduction, Yufei felt even more strange. The 8th Root Army is not enough, and there is a new 4th Army. Is there a big knife team or something? With the intention of joking, Yufei asked casually. Unexpectedly, Paramount really answered seriously that there is indeed a big knife team. It is composed of some officers left over from the original 4th Army. They have an unspeakable hatred for the Orcs, and would rather fight against the Orcs with their lives. This team was originally called the Officers Suicide Squad, but later, because most of these officers used knives as weapons, they were nicknamed the Big Knife Team. Yufei was really speechless now. He should just be the head of his own independent regiment. The new 4th Army's Big Knife Team was totally unpopular. Yufei didn't have to wait too long. 3 days after the 8th Army entered Xyrek City, the Orc troops finally arrived here. As a senior officer, Yufei saw some human scattered troops fleeing into Xyrek City on the tower. However, more human soldiers were not allowed in, because the Orcs were following too closely, but died under the walls of Xyrek City. In the past, Yufei would definitely feel disgusted with this kind of behavior of watching people die without helping. However, after being a tree for so long, he seemed to have become indifferent to the disappearance of life, so he was unmoved, especially since these lives that disappeared were just some aliens in his eyes. However, the Orcs' approach to the city meant that the mage group's leisure days were over. Yufei's magicians were divided into 2 groups, led by 2 sky-level magicians, Scott and Morton, and rotated into shifts. Among the magicians under Yufei, almost 3/5 were earth magicians, not the most popular and most lethal fire magicians in the army. Yufei was a little surprised at first, but after Scott's explanation, he understood. This is actually a matter of experience. The Holy Lion Empire and the Orcs have been fighting for more than a month. The biggest problem found is that the city walls that humans rely on as a barrier are relatively fragile under the inexplicable attacks of the Orcs, and they are completely ineffective. Those catapults that can produce incendiary bombs and wolf cavalry that can cause great damage to the city walls make it impossible for humans to fully demonstrate their defensive advantages. After suffering a lot of losses, the Holy Lion Empire finally found an effective way, which is to use magic. Most of the Orcs who had turned green seemed to have no knowledge of magic. The ability to cause great damage to the city walls was also the result of a mysterious force. Neither the incendiary catapults nor the wolf cavalry had anything to do with magic. Facts have also proved that magic can indeed bring relatively effective damage to the Orcs. Correspondingly, the use of magic in defense can also have a considerable effect on the attacks of the Orcs. Using earth magic to reinforce the city walls is a method used by humans and even all races in S-Laser. When the Night Elves raided the heartland of the Holy Lion Empire before, they saw how strong the city walls were after the combination of the Mage Core and the Mage Tower in those cities and passes. As the second largest city in the local kingdom, there are naturally Mage Towers in the city of Zurich, which are located not far behind each wall. The spells cast by the magicians in the Mage Tower can completely act on the city walls and even farther outside the city walls. The Orcs seem to be more cautious. When they attacked the city of Zurich, they did not launch an offensive directly, but surrounded the city of Zurich first. Yufei roughly estimated that there were about 300,000 Orcs surrounding Zurich city. This number was actually not as many as the 8th Root Army and the new 4th Army combined, but the combat effectiveness was the opposite of the number. In terms of defense, the 8th Root Army and the new 4th Army were responsible for 2 walls respectively. Yufei's magician regiment was also stationed in 2 magician towers. Of course, not all of them. Yufei divided the 8th Army Mage Regiment into 2 parts for shifts, and each part had 5 teams led by a cloud-level magician. There were 2 teams in each of the 2 magician towers, and the remaining team was used as a mobile force to put out fires in 2 places. As for Yufei himself, he did not stay in the magician tower. His identity was a spiritual magician, and ordinary magician towers could not amplify spiritual magic, so Yufei simply stayed on the city wall. The Orcs did not play any tricks of surrounding 3 sides and missing one. Soon after completely surrounding Zurich city, they launched a tentative attack. However, it was just a tentative attack for the Orcs, but it made the humans in Zurich city feel like they were facing a great enemy. Because this first wave of attack was launched by the strange catapults of the Orcs. In Yufei's observation, the boulders thrown by the Orcs' catapults were actually not as big as those thrown by the mountain giants. The instantaneous damage caused to the walls of Zurich City was not that serious when they hit them. But after the boulders fell, some flames strangely ignited on the parts of the walls that were bombarded. The hard walls gradually showed some signs of cracking under the scorching of the flames. It turned out to be the catapults of the orcs, and it was a version with an upgraded burning effect. Yufei understood. In the previous battles, the catapults of the orcs that could set the walls on fire made humans miserable. However, after such a long war, humans have also found some effective countermeasures. It's time for the mage core to contribute. A large amount of khaki light and a small amount of aqua blue light gushed out from the various wizard towers in Zurich City, covering the walls of Zurich City. The khaki light was naturally the effect of earth magic. The cracks on the walls and the parts that were smashed by boulders were gradually repaired under the effect of these khaki lights, as if a hand was reshaping the walls like a clay figure. When the aqua blue light reached the walls, it immediately turned into streams of water, extinguishing the flames burning in various parts of the walls, making them unable to cause subsequent damage to the walls. The orcs outside the city were not surprised to see this scene, as humans had used such means in some previous cities. In fact, the burning catapults could restrain the human magicians, so that they could only be busy repairing and maintaining the walls instead of casting a large amount of killing magic to harm the orcs, which had already made the orcs very satisfied. However, even if the burning catapults were offset by the magicians in Zurich City, the orcs still had two other types of siege weapons. Thanks to the book friend Yubeo Kahan for the reward of 100 Nyangbi points. Chapter 569 Wolf Cavalry. Yufei could see clearly from the tower. The burning catapults of the orcs were thousands of meters away from the city wall. According to the war machinery level and magic ability of SLAs, humans could not threaten these burning catapults unless there were a lot of high-level magic or forbidden spells. Yufei was not surprised at all that the burning catapults of the orcs had a range far exceeding the war machinery of the SLA's world. The status of the burning catapults in the orcs was the same as that of the glaive throwers and the Night Elves. The range was also very long, and at the same level. The incendiary bombs that kept hitting the city wall made the mages of Zurich City busy casting water and earth magic to extinguish the flames and repair the city wall. The maximum attack increase and the effect of increasing the range of attack spells of the mage tower were completely not reflected. In this situation, a cavalry suddenly rushed out from the orc army in the distance. In the direction where Yufei was observing, there were about 10,000 cavalry rushing out, and it should be the same in the other three directions. Yufei's sharp eyesight made it easy for him to see the appearance of these orc cavalry. The mounts of this cavalry unit were giant wolves that were either black, grey, or brown, and the knights riding on the giant wolves all looked like werewolves. However, Yufei discovered the difference between these wolf cavalry and the werewolves of the Frostwolf clan. Compared with the werewolves native to SLAs, these wolf cavalry of the New Orcs looked like an upright giant wolf, and only a human-like face could be seen on their faces. The werewolves native to SLAs, such as the werewolves in the Frostwolf clan, that Yufei observed through the perspective of the bear warrior, were actually closer to human form. Only in the ears, tails and other places could it be seen that they were not human. This may be one of the reasons for the division between the new and ancient orcs. The origin of the orcs native to SLAs cannot be traced, but they have been evolving towards human form without change. This may be because many orcs have intermarried with humans. The orcs in Warcraft do not have the word human in their names. The orcs and humans are two completely independent races, and there was no intersection at the beginning. It should be for this reason that the native orcs of SLAs chose to integrate the power of the orcs from Warcraft that descended on them, and there would be various changes. This is reflected in the wolf cavalry, that is, the original human-like appearance has become atavistic. These atavistic wolf cavalry have a very good advance speed, and under the cover of the burning catapult, they quickly came to the bottom of the wall of Zurich City. The magicians were busy repairing the wall, and only a few attack magic flew out, failing to stop this group of wolf cavalry. When these wolf cavalry came under the eyes of Yufei and others, they raised their scimitars and began to chop the wall. It stands to reason that, if it is not a special siege machine, individual weapons, even if they are giant hammers and axes, will hardly cause damage to the magic reinforced walls. However, on the top of Zurich City, the human officers and soldiers all looked solemn. A closer look showed that the wolf cavalry's scimitar, which was like a toothpick compared to the city wall, could easily cause a big crack in the city wall that was reinforced by 2 magical processes, turning stone into mud and mud into stone. It is so. Paramount frowned, talking to himself, as if he was talking to Yuffie. I don't know what these orcs' weapons are made of. They can cause such great damage to the city wall, but in real battle, they are not as sharp as when they chop the city wall. It is really strange. Yuffie understood in his heart that the wolf cavalry could easily damage the city wall, but could not show the advanced weapons in battle. It was indeed difficult for the natives of SYNOPSIS to understand. As for Yuffie himself, he understood the reason for this situation. In the Warcraft game, the wolf cavalry's attack type has siege, which can cause more than twice the damage when destroying buildings. This is reflected in the real world. That is, it is easier for them to destroy the city wall than to kill people. Originally, the magicians in Zurich City were already having a hard time dealing with the burning catapults. Almost all the magicians stationed in the mage tower who took turns to work together to make the repair speed of the city wall equal to the speed of destruction. However, after the wolf cavalry of the orcs participated in the attack on the city wall, the officers on the top of the city could clearly see with their naked eyes that the repair speed of the city wall could not keep up with the speed of destruction by the orcs. This is not a solution. The city wall will be opened in half an hour at most, and it will be completely destroyed in less than 2 hours. Paramount said affirmatively, and quickly discussed countermeasures with the officers around him. As the head of the 8th Army Mage Corps, Yuffie was naturally pulled into this brief meeting, but he was not prepared to express any opinions. Anyway, in the eyes of these soldiers, he, a magician, should not be good at military affairs, so he just sat aside and watched how the elite officers of the Holy Lion Empire dealt with the current situation. A tall and thin officer took the lead in raising an opinion. The reason why the repair speed of the city wall cannot keep up with the speed of destruction is mainly caused by the wolf cavalry under the city. In fact, we only need to kill these wolf cavalry to solve the crisis. The tall and thin officer's words seemed to be well organized, but after he finished speaking, all the officers present, including Yuffie, looked at this guy with contempt. Aren't you talking nonsense? What we need now is a solution. Everyone knows that killing the wolf cavalry can eliminate the crisis. If it were in the past, Yuffie might have asked Paramount and other officers why they didn't use logs and rolling stones to deal with these wolf cavalry under the city. They were there working hard to chop the city wall, not caring about the situation above their heads. They were simply live targets. But after fighting a lot of battles in S-Laser, to be more precise, after seeing the Night Elf troops and humans fight a lot of battles, Yuffie was not surprised why the city of Zurich did not have such city defense equipment. In the human world, only towns and small cities can use logs and rolling stones to defend the city. In slightly larger cities, wizard towers are generally built. The war spells amplified by the mage tower are much more lethal and more convenient to defend the city than the rolling logs. This Zurich city is the second largest city in the kingdom, where the 8th army is now. There are many mage towers in the city, so it is naturally impossible to equip it with low-end city defense equipment such as rolling logs. Therefore, when the magicians were restrained, the wolf cavalry could break into the city wall and destroy the city wall without restraint. As for archers, there are too few warriors in S-Laser who use archers as weapons, and there are only some ordinary archers in the army. Archers who have not practiced fighting spirit or only have the strength of apprentices cannot cause effective damage to these wolf cavalry whose strength is obviously around silver. Paramount certainly knew this, and knew that the tall and thin officer was talking nonsense. However, he did not reprimand the guy, but directly gave the officers present 2 choices, allowing everyone to discuss and decide on these 2 choices. There is no need to think about anything else now. The decision to be made is to either defend the city wall and fight the orcs in the streets after half an hour to 2 hours, or abandon the city wall and the army will go out of the city and fight the orcs in the field. Paramount's tone was very firm, not giving the officers the opportunity to think about other ways. Yes, time is tight and there is no time to think about it. When these 2 options were put forward, almost all the officers present subconsciously wanted to choose the former. The advantage of humans in the war with alien races is that the city is strong. If you give up the city wall, wouldn't it be using your own weakness to attack the enemy's strength. But Yufei saw that Paramount actually wanted to adopt the approach of giving up the city wall. Sure enough, when those officers opened their mouths and wanted to continue to defend the city wall, Paramount stopped them with a stern look. These officers were all old subordinates of Paramount and naturally knew what the Legion commander meant. This was to let them think about it more. Thanks to the book friends Daddy, Wokayushin, and Hangbei Busikayangfan for their precious monthly tickets. Chapter 570, Choose Field Battle. Soon, the first officer spoke up in support of the choice of abandoning the city wall. The first officer to understand was the tall and thin guy who had been talking nonsense before, which surprised Yufei. Commander, I think it's better for us to abandon the city wall. Zurich City. In fact, there is no need to defend it. This city wall can't play a defensive role at all. Compared with street fighting, I think field fighting is more reliable. This is what the tall and thin officers said. Those who can reach the position of senior officers are generally not just strong, but also have high sensitivity in war. Before, they subconsciously wanted to choose to stick to the city wall, just because of their habit. After Paramount stopped them from making a choice immediately and asked them to think about it, these officers quickly turned their minds. Yes, there is really no need to defend this city wall. Generally speaking, the role of the city wall is to be used for defense, so that the long-range troops and magicians in the city can effectively kill the enemies outside the city. But now, it seems that the city wall here in Zurich City is not playing the role it should play. On the contrary, in order to maintain the integrity of the city wall, the magicians were exhausted like dead dogs. As for the magician group under Yufei, if it were not for the shift system and the reserve team, those magicians would have been unable to hold on. In this case, it would be better not to have the city wall. In fact, the choice to be made is whether to fight in the streets or in the field. There is no doubt that Paramount and the officers around him will choose to fight in the field. Generally speaking, the concern of street fighting is that it will bring disaster to the residents in the city, but the residents in Zurich City have long been relocated, so there is no need to worry about this. But the key is that in street fighting, the role of the Magician Tower cannot be reflected. Although the war magic amplified by the Magician Tower is powerful, it is impossible to control it as flexibly as the magic cast by a single magician. If the orcs in the core of Zurich City start a street fight, then the magic cast by the Magician Tower will have to worry about whether it will accidentally hurt friendly forces. The magician group can only let the magicians rely on their own magic to fight, which greatly reduces the influence on the battle situation. Although the combined forces of the 8th Root Army and the new 4th Army are slightly larger than the Orcs troops attacking Zurich City, the average strength of the human troops is far inferior to that of the Orcs. If the magicians can no longer play a big role, the battlefield will definitely be a one-sided situation. If you choose to go out of the city to fight in the field, it seems to give up the advantages brought by the city wall, but in fact it liberates the magic tower. The war magic emitted by the magic tower, which can increase the magic range, can reach about 500 to 600 meters outside the city. With the support of the magic tower, even if the average strength of the human troops is not as good as that of the orcs, they still have the strength to fight. Instead of passively waiting for the orcs to break through the city wall and start a street fight, it is better to take the initiative to attack and fight the orcs with the support of the magic tower. Soon, the officers unanimously passed the resolution to abandon the city wall and take the initiative to fight the orcs. As for Yufei on the side, he did not express his opinion and was ignored by the officers. Well, I really think of myself as a classic magician who is not good at foreign affairs. Yufei was complaining in his heart, but he had some appreciation for Paramount. This soldier-like Legion commander was quite capable, and he made decisions quickly and decisively. Indeed, this brief meeting said so much, but the final decision was made in less than 3 minutes. Under Paramount's assignment, the officers hurried down the city wall, each taking charge of their own team, or notifying the new 4th Army. 20 minutes later, the wall of Zurich City had become tattered. As far as Yufei was observing, although the khaki light from the mage tower had been trying to heal the cracks and holes on the wall, it could only take care of one thing, and not the other. Just below Yufei, a group of wolf cavalrymen had dug a big hole in the wall. The khaki light that spread over was often split by the wolf cavalrymen, before it began to repair it. It looked like this place was about to be opened up. This was not okay. Yufei frowned. In his mental perception, although the human troops in the city have almost gathered, there are still many troops still in the process of organizing, which will take at least 5 minutes. It would not be a good thing to let these wolf cavalrymen attack the city wall like this. Forget it. After all, he has the position of the head of the 8th Army Mage Corps, so he must show his ability. Paramount and Yufei are the only two people left on the top of the city, but Paramount is commanding the large troops in the city and has not noticed the situation below the city for the time being. Paramount, who was waving the flag, suddenly felt a wave sweeping across his body, which made him shudder. Turning his head, he looked at Yufei, who was always mysterious and covered in a black robe. As a warrior with strong strength, he keenly felt that the wave seemed to be emanating from Earl O'Brien, the head of the Mage Corps, and at this glance, Paramount found that Yufei was observing his feet. His sight was immediately attracted by the situation of the city wall under his feet. When Paramount found that the city wall was about to be cut through by a group of wolf cavalry, he immediately broke out in a cold sweat. The troops have not yet been fully assembled and mobilized. If the orcs attack the city now, they will definitely cause a great defeat. But when he had this idea, the wolf cavalry had already died. Whether it was the wolf cavalry that continued to chop along the hole in the city wall, or the wolf cavalry that expanded the entrance, or chopped other parts of the city wall outside, as long as they were within 100 meters of Yufei, they all fell silently. There was no scar on the body of these wolf cavalry, and even their eyes were still wide open. But the light in their eyes had disappeared completely. Paramount could not see the wolf cavalry in the cave, but he could see it clearly from outside. The fall of those wolf cavalry was instantly connected to the ripples emitted by him and Yufei. Is this a spiritual magician? Paramount was a little uncertain, because spiritual magicians are relatively rare, and even he has not seen many. By the way, Earl O'Brien, why didn't I think of it earlier? Paramount suddenly remembered that he had heard of the name of this Earl O'Brien before. Because this Earl is a nobleman related to the St. Childe family. It is said that this mysterious Earl is indeed a powerful spiritual magician, and the origin of his title is that he saved the son of the head of the St. Childe family through spiritual magic. If the head of the magic group in front of him holding the letter of appointment from His Majesty is really the legendary Earl O'Brien, it would be easy to kill these wolf cavalrymen under the city silently. Paramount was thinking about these thoughts, but suddenly a voice came to his ears. I can only maintain a mental attack within a range of about 100 meters. Protect the hole below, and let the army gather and attack quickly. This is Yufei's voice, with a hint of command in his tone. However, Paramount did not care about this, but hurriedly continued to wave the flag, to command the soldiers of the 8th Army in the city, preparing to rush out of Zurich City. In fact, if Yufei wanted to use all his strength, how could he only kill and injure the wolf cavalrymen within a range of 100 meters? However, this was a battle for the Holy Lion Empire, and he had to maintain his status as a legendary master mage, so he was unwilling and unable to show a stronger power. With Yufei's delay, the 8th Root Army and the new 4th Army in Zurich City finally assembled before the wolf cavalry opened another road on the city wall, ready to rush out of Zurich City. Of course, the gate of Zurich City was so small that it was impossible for more than 300,000 troops in the city to rush out at once. Before that, it was necessary to kill or drive away the wolf cavalry that was close to the outside of the city wall, and this required the Mage Tower to do it. The Mage Tower in Zurich City stopped emitting khaki light to repair the city wall and instead switched to offensive war magic. Chapter 571. Inertia of thinking harms people. The wolf riders under the walls of Zurich City suddenly found that the yellowish brown light no longer appeared on the walls they were hacking at, and they repaired the damage they had caused. Previously, this annoying light had greatly hindered their destruction. Boom boom boom. Just half a minute after the Mage Tower gave up repairing the walls, most of the walls on all four sides of Zurich City collapsed. Sure enough, if there were no magical measures to maintain it, the walls would be no different from tofu in front of the burning catapults and wolf riders. However, the wolf riders who were excited to collapse the walls were all cold when they saw the scene behind the collapsed walls. In front of them were not the humans who were panicked, fleeing in all directions or desperately fighting back as they had imagined, but elite troops arranged in an orderly manner, with weapons emitting cold light. In addition, fireballs and wind blades fell on the heads of the wolf riders. In the ruins of the walls they were crossing, a large number of earth spikes also appeared, stabbing fiercely at the abdomen of the giant wolf under the wolf riders. Originally, according to the intention of Paramount and other officers, the magicians were to deal with the wolf cavalry that attacked the city wall first, and then let the human troops leave the city calmly. However, Yufei disagreed with this approach. After stopping them, he ordered the magician group to do it his own way. The strongest among the magicians of the new 4th army was only at the sky level, so after the integration of the army in Zurich City, they chose to obey Yufei, a legendary great magician with the title of Earl of the Empire. In Yufei's opinion, if only relying on the 4 gates of Zurich City, it would be a difficult task for the more than 300,000 troops in the city to go out of the city and fight the orcs. You know, when entering the city, it took several hours for these more than 300,000 troops to enter the city completely. In this case, it would be better to let those wolf cavalry directly cut down the city wall. Anyway, they were ready to give up defending the city wall. Whether the city wall was intact or turned into ruins had nothing to do with the subsequent battle. As for the other orc troops that would surge up at this time, there was no need to worry. The current situation shows that the other orcs in the rear had never expected that the city of Zurich would suddenly give up repairing the city wall. So when the wolf cavalry broke down the city wall, most of the orcs were stunned or cheered, and no one thought of rushing over immediately. This delay allowed the human army to rush out of Zurich City intact and quickly. As for the werewolves standing on the ruins of the city wall, they were quickly defeated by the impact of magic and hundreds of thousands of troops. When dealing with human soldiers, the wolf cavalry was not as sharp as when attacking the city wall. The orcs would never have thought that the defenders in Zurich City would take the initiative to give up the city wall in order to fight them in the field. After experiencing many wars with humans before, the orcs' thinking has also formed an inertia. That is, humans will definitely rely on the city wall to defend and fight them. The human side that came out of this thinking inertia first naturally took the lead. The large orc army was still waiting for the burning catapults and wolf cavalry to work hard for a while and then rush in after breaking through the city wall, so they did not line up. It was not until the orcs in the front row could see only helmets reflecting light and the human troops had already advanced to less than 300 meters in front of them that the orcs finally reacted. Fortunately, although the formation was scattered, the basic distribution of the orcs' troops had not been disrupted. The orcs in the front were all strong and thick-skinned guys like the Tauren, and there were also a large number of green-skinned orc infantry in the back, so they would not be dispersed by the human side. The Tauren in the front row almost simultaneously picked up the totem pole that was originally on the ground, hugged it horizontally, and connected it with the totem poles of other Tauren around them. The human troops rushing out of the city of Zurich were cavalry in the front. After a sprint of nearly 1,000 meters, the potential energy they had was so great that even the Tauren, whose individual strength was far superior to theirs, had to deal with it carefully. However, the Tauren's actions should have been extremely correct. The totem poles connected together and hugged by the Tauren in the front row were equivalent to a temporary simple wooden wall that could contain the charge of the human cavalry. However, the first wave of human attacks was not brought by these cavalrymen, but from the mage tower in the city of Zurich, where the walls had collapsed. Originally, the magicians in Zurich City could not have such a long range to attack the orcs thousands of meters away. Even the mage tower, which relies on the collection of energy to increase the range, could not cast magic at such a far distance. However, this impossibility turned from impossible to certain after Yufei participated in the operation of the mage tower. In fact, Yufei did not need to do much. The magic power forecasting war magic was contributed by other magicians in the mage tower. All he did was to use his powerful mental power combined with the circuits in the mage tower to transform these gathered energies into formed spells and guide them to the location he wanted to attack. How far can Yufei's mental power extend? Even if he only used the Self-King clone, if he covered it in a carpet-like manner, he could clearly explore the area with a radius of 10 kilometers with himself as the center. It only extended in one direction and could reach hundreds of kilometers. However, the gathered magic power will obviously weaken after being guided out of 1 kilometer. If you want to form a spell with the magic power gathered in Zurich City hundreds of kilometers away to create an effect similar to a missile, it is impossible. But this magic, which has weakened a little after crossing a distance of 1 kilometer, has caused the Minotaurs to suffer a great loss. Just like the Wolf Cavalry's experience before, the Minotaurs are facing not only 1 or 2 magic attacks. Instead, there are comprehensive attacks from top to bottom, from front to back, and from bottom to top. Within the range covered by Euphena's mental power, he can clearly see that when countless sharp earth spikes suddenly emerged from the ground, the faces of many Minotaurs instantly became the same as those of the green-skinned orc infantry behind them. Euphena can understand the suffering of these Minotaurs. After all, few people except Xiao Shao can endure the feeling of foreign objects suddenly pouring in from the back door, especially when this is not an elastic foreign object, but a sharpened hard thick earth spike. TSK 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 TSK, the most sinister thing is asterisk asterisk. Yufei shook his head. In fact, generally speaking, the magic used by human wizards in wars is more fire and wind magic with a large killing range and relatively stronger damage. As for the earth magic, it can only be used in places like repairing city walls. However, in the war with the Orcs, the Holy Lion Empire summed up the so-called experience and believed that only with a large number of earth magicians can the city walls be defended. Therefore, more than half of the magicians in Zurich City are earth magicians. In the past, the Orcs have faced human attack magic. Their experience is that human magic is often fireballs, wind blades, fire rain and hail from above and in front, and there are very few attacks from below. As a result, this time, the Orcs were secretly happy when they saw that the magic in the air was relatively sparse, and it seemed that the firepower of the humans here was not strong enough. But they didn't expect that most of the attacks came from below, attacking the lower body of themselves and other beasts. This is also a manifestation of inertia of thinking, which also made the Orcs suffer a great loss. So, sometimes, experience can kill people. The lethality of earth magic is not very strong, which is one of the reasons why this type of magic is rare in war. The large amount of earth spikes did not actually cause much damage to the Orcs, but the negative effects were too strong. Apart from anything else, most of the Minotaurs in the front row who were holding the totem poles with a firm look and ready to resist the charge of the human cavalry, after being asterisk dropped the totem poles as if they were electrocuted, covered their buttocks and mooed loudly. In this way, the charge of the human cavalry was completely borne by the Orcs. Although the combat effectiveness of human horses is far less than that of the wolf cavalry's wolves, the impact brought by their long-distance sprint is not comparable to that of the wolf cavalry. At least, the Minotaurs who put down the totem poles could not resist this impact for a while. Thanks to the book friend for 2 monthly tickets, and thanks to the book friend Goddess Guardian for 1 monthly ticket. Chapter 572 The Saint appears. Under the trouble of only a few Tauren who survived, or had a strong will, or were familiar with the feeling of foreign objects in their buttocks, so evil, could still hold the totem pole horizontally to resist the impact of human cavalry. But relying on a few Tauren alone, the overall situation could not be saved. Most of the Tauren threw away the totem poles in their hands, causing the temporary wooden wall that should have been very solid to fall apart, and the human cavalry regiment almost drove straight in. In fact, in the battle with the Orcs, the human cavalry seemed to be a death squad that would never return. When fighting against the same human legion, the cavalry generally has a huge advantage. In addition to its mobility, on the front battlefield they can tear open the enemy's defense line in one fell swoop by charging, and then break through the enemy's formation and attack repeatedly. But when fighting against Orcs whose individual strength is far stronger than that of ordinary human soldiers, it is absolutely impossible for tens of thousands of human cavalry to break through more than 200,000 Orc troops. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that the Mage Tower in Zurich City could cast spells on the Orc team 1,000 meters away under Euphena's control, tens of thousands of human cavalry would have found it difficult to break through the seemingly weak defense of the Tauren. With his mental power radiating, Euphena could clearly see every corner of the battlefield. Those human cavalry rarely entangled with the Tauren. No human cavalry was interested in these enemies who were covering their butts and screaming, as if they could take advantage. This was because they knew that with their strength, they could not effectively kill the thick-skinned Tauren, so it would be better to target the green-skinned ghosts behind them. However, even if they chose to give up fighting with the Tauren and directly attack the Orc infantry, the situation of the human cavalry was still not optimistic. In Euphenia's view, these brave human cavalry were like ice knives piercing hot cheese, causing damage to the Orcs in a lose-lose form. After a sprint of about 1,000 meters, the human cavalry had a strong piercing ability after raising their spears. However, the strength of these human cavalry was a flaw after all. After piercing the body of an Orc infantryman, they would often be severely injured by the recoil and then killed by other Orcs. In just 3 minutes, the cavalry of the 8th Root Army and the new 4th Army, totaling 60,000 to 70,000, were digested by the Orc army. The casualties they brought, even if they included the magic, were only about 50,000, and they were almost all the lowest level Orc infantry. Euphenia could not help but despise the situation that they had the first hand, but still suffered higher casualties than the other side. If it were the Blood Knight, they would be able to penetrate the formation of these Orcs in minutes. However, in the eyes of officers such as Paramount, such a comparison of casualties was already a very good start. At least after such a life exchange, the Orc army had less than 200,000 troops, while the new 4th Army and the 8th Root Army had a little more than 300,000 troops combined. In the 3 minutes that the cavalry fought for, the large human army also rushed up. During this period, the attack of the Mage Tower in Zurich City did not stop. Euphenia had been operating the Mage Tower to kill the Orcs with all his heart. As it stands now, the threat of the Orcs is much greater than that of humans. Euphenia is naturally happy to help humans weaken the power of the Orcs first. Not to mention, although more than half of the magicians under Euphenia are Earth magicians with weak lethality, they can still cause great trouble to the Orcs after the amplification of the Mage Tower. In fact, the intimidation effect brought by a large number of Earth spikes is far better than the killing effect. In the previous charge of the human cavalry, many Orc infantry were killed because they ignored the attack of the human cavalry, because they were careful of the Earth spikes that could pop up at any time underground. The Holy Lion Empire has also invested a lot to resist the Orcs. The magician regiments of the new 4th Army and the 8th Root Army had thousands of magicians in total. Even though they were divided into 2 groups and took turns to infuse magic power into the magic tower to construct spells, the density of magic released was still very high. When the human non-cavalry troops led by Paramount and the Orcs officially engaged in battle, Euphenia seized the opportunity to give the Orcs another wave of carpet strikes, catching the Orcs off guard again, allowing the human troops to gain some advantages as soon as they engaged in the battle. Before, Euphenia had always used a large number of ground spikes to harass the disgusting Orcs, which had a good effect. When the Orcs began to guard against possible attacks under their feet, he focused on magic such as fire and wind, bringing a round of real damage to the Orcs. This kind of trick of pretending and pretending was something Euphenia had already mastered when he was in the demon world. Now using it on the Orcs, it can really make them cry. Euphenia, who can observe the entire battle situation at any time, controls the magic tower in Zurich City and plays a role of a firefighter. Wherever the human side can't hold on, Euphenia will guide the Orcs in that place to cast a wave of magic to resolve the crisis. In his spare time, Euphenia also began to randomly cast ground spikes without a fixed point, causing many Orcs who had relaxed their vigilance to be killed again. For a moment, the Orcs became nervous again. For some reason, there were very few soldiers like troll witch doctors in this Orc army. Therefore, in front of the human army that was fighting for their lives and had long-range magic support, they could not play the advantage of strong average strength, which made the war enter a tense state. Euphenia deliberately controlled a thick ground spike with added ingredients and penetrated into a giant Tauren who was killing people in the human army. The Tauren's face immediately turned red, and he swung the totem pole randomly like a madman, killing and injuring many Orc infantry without distinguishing between enemies and friends. Euphenia laughed in his heart. He found that he suddenly liked the feeling of hiding in the dark and secretly ambush people in the game, watching the enemy suffer a great loss, and being extremely angry but unable to find the enemy. Hiss. No. Yufei suddenly felt a chill on the back of his neck. His figure rushed forward, and suddenly a few emerald green leaves flew out of his sleeves, emitting a hazy green light, and forming a shield made of leaves behind him. The sound of cloth being torn apart with difficulty rang out, echoing in the single room on the top floor of the Mage Tower. This is the most central Mage Tower in Zurich City, and it is also the hub of the defense system of the Mage Tower in Zurich City. It is here that Yufei controls the magic power contributed by the magicians in the city, causing a lot of casualties and great psychological pressure on the orcs. After rushing out for a distance, Yufei stopped and turned his head to look behind him. With a light exclamation, the first thing Yufei saw was the torn leaf dance shield. Yufei took a breath of cold air. No one knew the solidity of the leaf dance shield better than him. Even if it is an ordinary leaf, under the blessing of the leaf dance skill of Yufei's Elf King clone, it is stronger than the triggered magic shield cast by the general legendary or even epic magician. And the leaf dance shield with such strong defense was torn apart just like that. If Yufei hadn't reacted quickly, I'm afraid that his Elf King clone would have been split in half. Looking past the split leaf dance shield, Yufei saw an orc with green skin and a strange weapon that looked like a knife or a sword in his hand. Orc infantry? This is impossible. When he saw the green skin for the first time, Yufei subconsciously thought that he was ambushed by an orc infantry, but he quickly denied this ridiculous idea. If the orc infantry is so strong, the Night Elves should just surrender to the orcs. What is this? Behind the green-skinned orc who ambushed him, Yufei saw several small flags that seemed to be decorations, which made him suddenly realize. Bastard. No, it's the Swordmaster. Still wrong. This guy should be called the Cheap Saint. When Yufei saw the strange weapon that looked like a knife or a sword, he had some impression. When he saw the small flags used as decorations, he immediately recognized that this guy was the orc hero Sword Saint. Among the green-skinned orcs, only the Sword Saint has such a strong strength. Of course, calling him the Cheap Saint is not wrong. This hero is really too cheap. Chapter 573, Ward Baba and Ward Elsie. Human, who are you? When Yufei guessed the identity of the Swordmaster, the green-skinned guy with a flag on his back asked about Yufei's identity. This made Yufei a little annoyed. You didn't know who I was, and attacked me like this? If I hadn't reacted quickly, and was strong enough, wouldn't I have become an unknown ghost? At that moment, Yufei replied unhappily, my name is Ward Baba, who are you? The Swordmaster didn't find anything strange about the name Ward Baba, but continued to speak with a serious expression. Ward Baba, you are very strong, and qualified to know my name. Remember, you will die at the hands of Gromhelscream. Yufei was shocked. Is this guy the ruthless man who killed the demigod Cenarius? No, it should be a local orc who inherited the power of that guy like Thrall, and continued to use the name of Gromhelscream. Thinking of this, Yufei relaxed, and even felt like teasing the Swordmaster who hadn't reacted yet. Ward Elves, you are so good. Gromhelscream seemed a little angry. Ward Elves, remember that the person who killed you is named Gromhelscream. My name is not Ward Elves. Haha. Yufei finally couldn't help laughing. Could it be that Grom's soul descended and messed up his brain? He was so stupid. It seemed that the danger just now was only because of the sneak attack of this bastard. With this level of intelligence, he could beat this Grom in a few minutes. Speaking of which, the hero that Yufei hated the most in the Orcs of Warcraft was the Swordmaster. He vaguely remembered that when fighting against the Orcs, it often happened that when his hero was leveling up with his minions, the wild monster was about to be killed, and an Orc Swordmaster suddenly appeared and killed the wild monster with one knife, stealing money, experience, and equipment. And if you want to catch it, this guy's wind step cools down very quickly, and there is a mirror clone to disturb the line of sight, making it difficult to catch the real body. For a while, Yufei was almost driven crazy by a Swordmaster, who was extremely coquettish, and stole the wild monsters to the point of collapse. Well, speaking of it, this Swordmaster can indeed be regarded as a mage killer. But even if it is just an Orc Swordmaster with only 4 skills in Frozen Throne, the Windstep Mirror clone combined with the passive skill Critical Strike can also quickly kill his target like an assassin. In the battle, there are often situations where the enemy's entire base is blocked by a high-level Swordmaster. Moreover, the Swordmaster's ultimate move Bladderstorm can be said to be the most famous skill in Warcraft Frozen Throne. This skill has super damage and a wide range. It can even directly destroy a circle of buildings when rolled up. The most important thing is that the Swordmaster is still immune to magic when using Bladderstorm. Thinking a little far, Yufei pulled his thoughts out of the memory game and concentrated on dealing with the situation in front of him. Although the brainless local version of Grom Hellscream still didn't understand what Ward Bebe and Ward Els meant, his idea of killing Yufei was very firm. Grom raised the sword in his hand and pointed it at Yufei. I guess you, Ward Bebe, are the leader of the human magicians in this city, right? That means, as long as you are killed, those abominable magics will no longer be able to harm the brave orcs, right? Yufei suddenly realized that the Swordmaster appeared here for this matter. He suddenly remembered that in the information reported to him by the president of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce, there was actually news about the Swordmaster. Yufei vaguely remembered that the president described that there would often be powerful enemies suddenly appearing in the camp of the rear mage group, rolling up a huge storm and causing heavy casualties to the magicians. Now that I think about it, only the Swordmaster can rely on the wind step to silently break through the large number of human soldiers in front and raid to the back to kill the magicians. That huge storm should be the Blade Storm, right? This time, the Swordmaster is probably here to do this kind of thing. Just when Yufei was thinking about this, Grom, who raised his sword, suddenly disappeared in front of him. Yufei immediately became alert. He knew that this was Grom using the wind step skill again and entered the invisible state. After the wind step is activated, the Sword Saint will enter the invisible state and the movement speed will increase greatly. The most important thing is that the first attack of the Sword Saint in the wind step state will cause a lot of extra damage. This may be the reason why Yufei's Leaf Dance shield was directly broken by Grom's attack. Fortunately, although Grom's wind step cools down quickly, it is not as good as the Leaf Dance, a constant skill of Yufei's Elf King clone. As long as there are leaves, Leaf Dance can be performed rather than saying it is a skill. It is better to say that it is an ability to control and strengthen leaves. Pieces of transparent leaves that are shining with a faint light flew out of Yufei's space ring. This time, he took out not the ordinary leaves that he took out casually in a hurry just now, but the leaves of the eternal tree of the main body. Judging from the appearance alone, the leaves picked from Yufei's main body are crystal clear and shining, and they are definitely not ordinary products. In fact, Yufei's main body is now nearly 10,000 meters tall, and his leaves are naturally huge. These bowl-size leaves that Yufei took out from the space ring are actually concentrated products. A leaf with a diameter of 5 or 6 meters, which is large enough for an elephant to stand on, is condensed to the size of a bowl. Its density and strength can be imagined. Moreover, Yufei used the leaf dance technique to manipulate the leaf. Under the blessing of power, these condensed leaves are many times stronger than fine steel. Yufei densely distributed these leaves in all directions around him, forming a protective shield with no dead angles. If the local magicians of Aslay saw it, they would think it was a new magic shield. Unless necessary, Yufei did not want to expose his identity as the avatar of the Elf King, even if it was just to expose that he was a Night Elf. Therefore, he only used mental magic before, fearing that humans would find something wrong after using the spells he had. However, now facing the Swordmaster Grom Hellscream, it is obviously impossible to hold it with mental power alone. Yufei can only use the skills possessed by the Elf King. Anyway, although there are few humans who use wood magic, there are some. Just be careful not to be associated with the elves. Ding, the transparent shield formed by the leaf dance technique behind Yufei suddenly made a sound, and then ripples spread out there, but the shield did not break after all. Grom's figure slowly appeared, and he stared at Yufei in doubt. Ward Baba, how did you suddenly become so much stronger? Yufei was stunned. Why is this guy so talkative? Could it be that the targets he killed in the past were all killed by his sneak attack with the wind step, so he had a lot of things to say, but had nowhere to say them? An assassin should act like an assassin. Which assassin would report the name of the target he assassinated and ask so many questions? However, thinking so, Yufei still looked serious and answered Grom's question seriously. There is no reason, just because I'm Nid Baba and you are Ward Els. The son can't beat the father, so you can't hurt me now. Yufei's face was solemn, as if he was talking to Grom about a top secret event, but in fact he was laughing in his heart. Even though Grom was slow, he understood after hearing the words a son can't beat his father. He originally wanted to ask Yufei why he changed his name to Ned Baba, but now that he understood, he felt the flame of anger in his heart suddenly burning up, roaring and slashing at Yufei. I'm Ned the father. You are Waddle, a damn human. How dare you tease me? Grom hell scream. I will let you know what despair is. Grom's eyes were bloodshot, obviously stimulated by the facts he just learned. Yufei laughed heartily. I actually accepted an orc son for nothing today. Ha 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 ha. You are quite organized when you speak. How come you are as stupid as a pig beast? Thanks to the book friend Weihei for the reward of 100 Nyangbi points. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 574 Mirror Image. Grom did not respond to Yufei's words. He was already furious. The strange shaped sword in his hand kept slashing at Yufei's leaf dance shield. Unfortunately, it could only make a series of ding-dong sounds and could not break the shield made of the leaves of the eternal tree. Yufei was too lazy to tease this guy. Playing with an enemy with high IQ will give you a great sense of accomplishment, but it is really hard to take advantage of such a stupid orc with words. Yufei just watched Grom with interest as he chopped his shield hard without doing anything else. Hooala. Suddenly, an unusual sound sounded. Yufei was startled. Grom didn't know what was going on, but he actually shattered his shield with one sword. The strange shaped sword just chopped at Yufei's head. Judging from the anger in Grom's eyes, he wanted to chop Yufei in half. Yufei's thoughts turned rapidly. Just now, Grom's extra damage attack in the windstep state was ineffective against his shield. How could he break the leaf dance shield just by slashing casually? He suddenly thought of the easily overlooked passive skill of the Sword Saint, the critical strike. Yes, it should be the critical strike. If the guess is correct, the level 5 critical strike will have 10 times the damage of ordinary attacks. However, this Grom has not reached the myth level and cannot reach the level of the 9th level of the hero level. This should be a level 4 critical strike with 8 times the damage of ordinary attacks. 8 times the damage of ordinary attacks is already extremely terrifying. This is 8 times the damage of ordinary attacks of an epic level strongman. If Grom's critical strike can be effective frequently, then he can reach the myth level in terms of attack strength. Like now, Yufei's Eternal Tree version of Leaf Dance Shield should be able to defend against all attacks below the myth level, but it was directly broken by Grom's attack. After analyzing so much in his mind, Yufei did not panic at all during his actions. Although he was shocked by the horror of the Sword Saint's critical strike, he still responded in time. With a thought, a large number of pale golden vines suddenly sprang out from the ground between Yufei and Grom. These growing vines entangled Grom's sword, slowing down the sword's momentum, and finally stopped only half a centimeter away from Yufei's head. Yufei relaxed. Fortunately, when he took out the leaves of the original body, he sprinkled some golden vines on the ground, otherwise it would be really dangerous. Yufei's Elf King clone has the skill of vines, so there are many special vine seeds in his space ring. Of course, as the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire, he naturally does not need to collect special vine seeds himself, which are all collected by his subordinates. The golden vine is the one with the highest toughness in Yufei's space ring. It is said that this kind of vine needs to absorb golden vines to grow, but under the catalysis of Yufei's vines, it does not need to be so troublesome, and it grows directly to save him. The spreading adamantium vines were obviously not satisfied with just wrapping around Grom's weapon, and soon wrapped around Grom's body. Layer after layer of light golden vines covered Grom's body, as if countless dancing tentacles were invading him, which looked extremely heavy. Under Yufei's control, the adamantium vines that tightly wrapped around Grom even suspended him in the air, not giving Grom a chance to break free. At the same time, the adamantium vines were constantly tightening, trying to strangle Grom to death with their tough vines. The lethality of the Swordmaster with the critical hit skill was too accidental. If the critical hit appeared several times in a row, Yufei would definitely not be able to stop it. Therefore, he was not going to delay any longer and wanted to get rid of this Orc Sword Master directly. It was a pity that Grom's Hellscream was an Orc who could kill a demigod. Even if this was just an SRAS native Orc who had merged with his soul, it would not be so easy to get rid of him. Yufei's idea was not bad. It was difficult for anyone to exert force when hanging in the air. The adamantine vines were also tough. They were the toughest vines and slays that the Dark Knight Empire had found for its emperor. Grom was indeed unable to use his skills to break free from the restraints, but that did not mean that he could not use his skills. Feeling the creaking sound of his body being strangled by the strange vines, Grom was very anxious. Closing his eyes, his figure suddenly disappeared from the sphere formed by the adamantine vines wrapping around him, and then several green figures appeared outside the vine ball. Is this okay? Yufei looked at the several identical Groms in front of him in amazement. He knew that this was the mirror clone skill of the Swordmaster, but he did not expect that this skill could be used to remove the restraints of his own vines. Grom, who used the mirror clone skill to remove his own restraints and turned into several, had no intention of evacuating after suffering a loss. Those identical Groms rushed towards Yufei at the same time, raised their strange shaped swords, and chopped them down together. Ding 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 ding. Several knocking sounds were heard in succession. It was these Grom's big swords that chopped on the leaf dance shield that Yufei had rearranged, but they returned without success. However, this scene did not make Yufei feel relieved at all. The attack power of the Sword Saint's mirror image was originally insufficient. Remember that the mirror image had no damage in the strategy version, but this Grom's mirror image should have attack power. Of course, this attack power is not commendable for the leaf dance shield. But Yufei was not worried about the mirror image, but the Grom's body mixed in the mirror image. Grom himself can hit a fatal blow if he mixed in these mirror images and suddenly attacked. Yufei felt that he might not be able to react in time. This Grom did not show the stupidity that was teased casually in the words just now in the battle, but instead seemed very skilled in fighting. In the round of attacks by the mirror image just now, Yufei deliberately sensed that which Grom had a stronger attack power, and the idea of distinguishing the real body by this point was broken. Well, fortunately, a fatal blow cannot be delivered casually, so just be careful to avoid these mirror images. With the leaf dance shield, Yufei hid in the corner of the room, secretly controlling the golden vines to continue to entangle several Groms that appeared in the room. However, Grom seemed to have learned it well, and no matter how Yufei controlled it, it was difficult to catch up. Only after the massive growth of the golden vines forced Grom into the corner could he be tied up again. Unfortunately, as soon as he tied up this Grom, he turned into a phantom and disappeared. It was obviously a mirror image, and not the real body. However, although it was difficult to distinguish Grom's true body for a while, and catch those who were running around in the room, and trying to attack Yufei, but the golden vines proliferated rapidly under Yufei's control, and finally forced these Groms to be unable to get close to him, so they could not attack him. If this goes on, when the golden vines fill the entire room, Grom will still be caught, right? Yufei blinked and thought so, and relaxed a little. However, just when he relaxed, the sound of broken glass suddenly appeared in his ears again. Not good. Spiritual perception is faster than eyes. Yufei had just blinked and had not opened his eyes before he found Grom quietly appearing in front of him. It turned out that this guy's real body had turned on the windstep to hide when using the mirror clone skill. No wonder the strength of those mirror attacks is the same. I thought Grom deliberately controlled it so that I didn't want to find out which one is the real one. It turns out that they are all mirrors. With only the extra damage of the first attack in the windstep state, Grom cannot destroy the leaf dance shield. But now the leaf dance shield was quietly broken, which means that Grom's attack not only contains the extra damage of the windstep, but also has the effect of a fatal blow. Yufei's heart was alarmed. The combination of these two skills is not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Yufei has already felt the breath of death. Grom's attack, which had already reached the mythical level of lethality, split the leaf dance shield and continued to strike Yufei. It seemed that Yufei's Elf King clone was destined to be destroyed. Haha, I was kicked out of the house and was not even allowed to bring my notebook. It was really annoying to type in the internet cafe, but fortunately I managed to complete it smoothly. Chapter 575 Blade Storm. At this critical moment, Euphemi shouted, "I will destroy you on behalf of Demacia," and then his small universe exploded. He took out the Holy Grail and transformed into Ultraman and shot Grom away with a super electromagnetic cannon. Grom turned into a shining star in the sky, and the words "I will definitely come back" echoed in the air. Well, okay, the above are all Euphemi's own fantasies. In fact, if it weren't for an equipment, he would really suffer a big loss this time. After all, none of the heroes under Euphemi's command have died, and he doesn't know whether his heroic clone can be resurrected in the Elder's altar after being killed. The equipment that helped Euphemi escape Grom's fatal blow was actually an equipment that Euphemi got a long time ago. The attributes attached to this equipment are not too strong, but Euphemi has always placed it in the equipment column of his clone. At this critical moment, this long-hidden equipment finally played its role. Grom's sword, which had reached the level of mythical lethality, was about to fall on Euphemi's Elf King clone's head. Even his hood had cracked under the sword wind. Suddenly, a faint light flashed on Euphemi's Elf King clone's body, and then his body became ethereal, looking a bit like a ghost. Grom used all his means to hit the blow, and it just passed through the ethereal Euphemi Elf King clone, and chopped heavily on the ground under Euphemi, creating a huge crack in the floor. "What's going on?" Exclamation mark. Grom was shocked. He was not so afraid of Euphemi turning into a ghost. Grom believed that even the undead would die again under his sword, but his confident attack had no effect, which he really couldn't accept. It was not wrong to say that Euphemi turned into a ghost because he used the active skill Ghost Form attached to the Ghost Scepter. Ghost Form. Transform yourself into a ghost form, which makes you unable to perform normal attacks and not be harmed by normal attacks. You will take an additional 44% damage when you are attacked by magic. The duration is 4 seconds, and the cooldown is 30 seconds. If you are facing a magician, turning on the ghost form is a complete act of committing suicide. But when facing a sword master, this equipment can be called a magic weapon. The sword of the sword master with a critical hit effect and extra damage from the wind step can easily kill an enemy at the peak of the epic level, but it can never cause even a trace of damage to Euphemi in the ghost form. For the hero of the sword master, the ghost form is actually equivalent to an invincible effect. This is not a joke. Even if the sword master uses Blade Storm, it cannot cause damage to Euphemi in the ghost form. Although Blade Storm is a skill, its damage is not magic damage. Euphemi just remembered the equipment of the Ghost Scepter and successfully rescued himself. Well, this way the battle will be much easier. Euphemi was delighted to find that when facing Grom, in addition to the 7-point all attribute bonus, the most important thing about the Ghost Scepter was that it could give him 4 seconds of invincibility every half a minute. Grom reacted after a moment of loss of composure after his confident attack missed. He swung the sword that had fallen on the floor again and slashed at Euphemi's ethereal body with a few more swords, but it was too long to cause any damage. Euphemi felt a chill. The ghost form only lasted for 4 seconds, and 2 seconds had already passed. If Grom's sword was still stabbing at him when he returned to his normal form after 2 seconds, wouldn't he be dead? No, he had to get rid of this guy quickly. At this time, the room was filled with adamantium vines. Grom's mirror clone couldn't bear too much damage, and it had disappeared under the entanglement and squeezing of the adamantium vines. A large number of adamantium vines, under Euphemi's control, swarmed in and immediately wrapped up Grom's body. Of course, Grom would not allow the adamantium vines to entangle him again. He swung his great sword to break through the wall behind Euphemi and jumped out. Euphemi had retreated to the corner before, and behind him was the outer wall of the mage tower. Although he failed to restrain Grom again, Euphemi still breathed a sigh of relief. It was good enough to force this guy away and not have him stab me with a great sword. Just 1 second after Grom broke through the wall and escaped, Euphemi turned back from the ghost form and returned to his previous state. However, his hood was destroyed before he turned on the ghost form, but it could no longer cover the beautiful appearance of Euphemi's Elf King clone. Euphemi didn't care and quickly took out another set of identical clothes from the space ring and put them on. Of course, the hood of this set was still intact. Then, Yufei jumped out of the big hole that Grom had opened and stood still in the void. Countless adamantium vines also swarmed out of the big hole and spread out. No, we can't let Grom go. Yufei knew that the swordsman entered the city of Zurich to rescue the orc army outside the city. Now that he failed to kill the leader of the mage group who coordinated the overall situation, he would definitely change his target to ordinary magicians. He was counting on humans to weaken the strength of the orcs, and he couldn't let this large-scale battle fail. Looking at Grom, who had already flown to the outside of another mage tower in Zurich City, Yufei quickly flew over there. During the flight, Yufei pointed his hand at the adamantium vines that were winding and growing below, and released a plant enlightenment spell. The vines produced by the skill of vine clusters lasted for a relatively short time. After a short fight just now, they were about to return to the form of seeds, and such seeds could no longer use vine clusters immediately. The seeds of the adamantium vines are very rare, and Yufei didn't have more in his space ring, so he simply used the plant transformation technique to transform the adamantium vines into plant-like creatures, thereby extending the duration of the vines. Yufei flew very fast. He used his mental power to push himself and followed Grom to the mage tower on the west side of Zurich City. There was a huge hole on the outer wall of the mage tower, just like the one just now. Obviously, Grom no longer had the intention of sneaking in with the wind step to assassinate. He felt strong pressure and unprecedented frustration from Yufei, and now the only thing he wanted was to complete the task quickly. Without hesitation, Yufei quickly flew in from the hole, but it was a pity that it was still a little late. Inside the mage tower, most of the magicians who were only bronze and silver levels were obviously unable to resist Grom. When Yufei entered the mage tower, he saw the last cloud level magician inside, who was cut in half by Grom's shield. Yufei calmly looked at Grom, whose sword was dripping with blood, and erected the living adamantium vines that had spread outside the mage tower to rush into the mage tower. Anyway, these magicians are all humans, or more precisely, enemies of the Night Elves. If they die, they die. If they can get rid of Grom, who should be one of the highest ranking people in the Orcs, these human magicians will have died for what they deserved. Looking around at the adamantium vines pouring into the mage tower, Grom grinned, and then his figure flashed and turned into several green-skinned sword masters, fleeing in all directions. Yufei spent a long time getting rid of these clones, but found that they were all mirror images. Grom's real body was the same as before, using the wind step to become invisible and escape. Too shameless. Yufei was very helpless. If it was just an ordinary one, Yufei would be able to find it with just a mental scan. But Grom's wind step is a skill from Warcraft, and Yufei, the Elf King clone, could not detect him after he became invisible. Flying out of the mage tower again, Yufei saw endless sword blades in front of him. The crackling sound resounded throughout the city of Zurich, and a huge storm swept through the city with only 1,000 magicians left. The storm was made up of sharp sword blades. This is troublesome, Yufei muttered to himself. Thanks to the book friend SYNOPSIS for the monthly ticket. Thanks to the book friend Zunshizan for the evaluation ticket. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.